Good morning and welcome to the 146th meeting of the Internet Society Board of Trustees. This is also the 2019 Annual General Meeting. According to the Society's bylaws, the terms of 3 board officers, the chair of the board, the treasurer, and the secretary, expire at the start of the Annual General Meeting. According to the bylaws, the president opens the AGM, and I do so now. The bylaws also require that the first order of business for the AGM is to elect a board chair, who will then take over the management of this meeting. In lieu of written ballots, the board has opted to use an online voting platform for these elections. I have asked Kevin to configure the electronic ballots and distribute the voting links. As you recall, John sent a message to the board list about a month ago asking for expressions of interest in the various officer positions. Only Gonzalo expressed an interest in the office of board chairs. Gonzalo, are you still willing to serve in that position?
Yes, I am.
It is ISOC tradition to ask at this time if anyone else is interested in running for the chair position. Is there anyone? Seeing none, would you like to say a few words about your candidacy?
Yeah, very briefly. As we discussed yesterday, I would like to propose, a few focus areas that we discussed, and for this cycle actually, which include, working on our conflict of interest policies, to look for revenues that they are, different than the current revenue streams we have, and then to work on a set of issues which are more like they are oversight in nature, like the foundation and all the process for alignment of the organization with the policy that Andrew, the community, and staff have done. So those would be the main focus areas that I would propose for the next cycle.
I would like to ask the candidate for chair and anyone who is not a voting trustee except for me leave the room now so the board can discuss the candidates.
Okay, we have 11 votes for Gonzalo Cabrera.
So, Gonzalo, I am pleased to announce that you've been elected chair. Votes and no abstentions, but of course we have one person absent.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and I highly appreciate the support. Thanks a lot. I'm very honored to continue serving in this role. And as you know, like when we started, I was swamping all of you with all the things I was doing, decisions, and the agreement we had was like that was too much traffic on the list. So I've been backing up on that. But if you guys think that now it's the moment to go back to the basically old ways of working, and I'm super happy to basically expose you to all the reminders and things going on and everything. So just think about that. I see some nods, some saying no, please. So just we can take it from there. We can. I'm aware that it's good to always be thinking about the future, and I think now we are structured in a way that it would be actually quite easy to kind of get a status update of everything that is going on in no more than 1 or 2 hours to the whole board at some point. So yeah, which actually, by the way, sometimes we do it in the working room, the working board calls. So, but anyway, that's something that I have in mind. So we will continue doing that. Thanks a lot. So with that, we can open the meeting. So that's point 3 on the agenda. So as Andrew indicated, we are in Montreal, Canada, and this is our meeting number 146. So I was thinking that for the future, maybe the apologies part should be done actually by the president, because we didn't mention that Mike is not present, and that was kind of in the voting. So we. No, I understand it's in the minutes, but anyway, just a formality that maybe we want to move the apologies at the beginning and then do. But anyway, so we have 11 trustees here. Mike, who is one of the new trustees, unfortunately couldn't make it. She sends apologies. So that's why we are only 11, and that's why there were only 11 trustees voting, because he couldn't even join online, unfortunately. So having said that, with the agenda in mind, any declarations of conflict? Or any agenda bash? Okay, so I will repeat that because they were not using the mic. So Glenn wants to declare conflict with PIR. Okay, thank you, Glenn. Good. Okay, fantastic. So moving on to point number 4 in the agenda, which is like we have to select 2 more officers, which are the secretary and the treasurer. So they are both in point number 4. So we will first elect the secretary and then the treasurer. So John himself, our current secretary, sent an expression of interest mail, and the only person that expressed any interest was John himself. But as Andrew said before, the tradition is that we ask at this point if someone else is actually interested as well, and also we will ask John if he is still willing. So first, John, are you still willing to serve?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? And Kevin, could you please set up the online voting with the options of John Levin, abstain? Yeah. Okay. So while Kevin is setting up the poll or the vote, I will ask the candidate John to make a brief statement.
Well, the secretary's job is primarily clerical. So to the extent that I'm doing anything beyond that, my goal in the past year or two has been to attempt to streamline the process so we spend less time doing routine stuff and more time doing substantive stuff. So that's why I have attempted to add consent agendas and clean up the bylaws. Like we don't have to have a kabuki election to elect Andrew to be himself. And I think that's pretty well under control. That's one of the reasons I'm interested in being on the governance committee. Just go through and see if there's more nits I can pick in this, so we can spend more time doing useful work.
Thank you, John.
Okay, the poll should be visible now.
Glenn.
Question for John.
Yes.
In the past, we hear what you would like to do and continue doing as an approach. Just curious, have you been happy or unhappy on some of the responses to the voting, or what's your overall view in terms of besides improving processes for policies, they're humans, right? So is there any issues that we need to be addressing?
Sometimes it can be difficult to get people's attention for e-votes, but that is, in recent months, it's been better. Also, yes, e-votes used to last a week, whether we liked it or not. We changed the rules, so once everybody's voted, it closes in a day. So actually, most of our votes now close pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's true. Lately, the response has been very good. So thanks for being so responsive. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, we have all the votes in.
So please, Kevin, go ahead and announce the result.
Votes for John Levine.
Okay, thank you. So congratulations, John. Working with you. So next step is to elect yet another officer, the treasurer. And when we asked for expressions of interest, we got Richard's interest. So again, the same process as before. Anyone else? Well, Richard, are you still interested?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wanted to be a candidate? Okay, seeing none, Richard, you want to give a or make a brief statement?
Yeah. So it's continuing today's theme of continuity planning. We've had a very smooth handoff in this initial 3 months or so. Having been on the finance committee for a few years, Sean and I were able to work together pretty closely and together with Sandy and achieve pretty smooth handoff. So I've been pretty pleased with how well this has gone. Hopefully it's worked well for other folks as well. I'm eager to continue looking after the financial stewardship of the society and helping work through some of the interesting issues we have with spending at the foundation and managing some of our reserves and things like that. And I'm also kind of thinking forward to my own transition. I want to make sure we get some folks on the finance committee who can serve in this role in another couple of years.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, usually we take the succession plan on our treasurer quite seriously, because that's an officer that has a bit of specialized knowledge. So we always want to make sure that we have someone being able to well, read balance sheets and analyze cash flows and everything. So that's always useful. So Kevin, are we ready? The options should be Richard Barnes and abstain.
Yep. You should find the ballot
Okay.
in board effect.
And for remote participants or people watching the video feed, it's just like the system takes a few minutes. So that's why we are waiting. Kevin.
You ready?
Yeah.
I have all the votes in.
So could you please announce the results?
11 votes for Richard Barnes.
Okay, thank you. So congratulations, Richard. Thanks for your willingness to continue serving. Okay, perfect. So now we have the three officers elected. So we can actually move to point number 5 on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. So John had a laptop crash, but I think we have recovered from that, and the minutes we saw were.
I sent draft minutes around a couple of days ago, and Kevin and Gonzalo offered some corrections. So as far as I know, they're right.
Okay, perfect. So are we ready to approve the minutes? Okay, so we will do this by show of hands. But first, I need someone to move. So Hans-Peter moves, someone to second, Olga seconds. And as I said, we're going to do this show of hands. The options are going to be yes, no, and abstain. So all trustees voting yes, please raise your hands. Abstentions? No votes. So the resolution passes unanimously with 11 votes. Moving on to point number 6 on the agenda, which is to approve the action items from the transfer of the action items from the previous board to this board. And just to give some background, we had a meeting, I think 1 month ago, and we decided to basically transfer or ask the future board to continue working on two items. One is, as we usually do, of course, the action plan of the organization, because the action plan and the board, the timing is different. The action plan typically goes, is basically we use the natural year, while the AGM usually is around summer. So that's why we have to transfer that. And the second one was to support the redesign of the ISOC fellowship programs. As you saw, some steps have already been taken. Sally is working, and her team are working hard on that. And we thought that it was good to basically explicitly ask the board to continue supporting that, since we didn't pass any resolution, but at least the discussions were interesting, and we wanted to capture that point in this way. Any questions on this? Okay, I see Mike, who is the only one that wasn't there when we sent this over the fence, nodding, so that's good. Okay, so I need someone to move. Sorry? Oh, yeah, so Mike moves. Someone who seconds, Walid seconds. And then again, we're gonna do this by show of hands. So the options will be yes, abstain, and no. So everybody voting yes, please raise your hands. Voting no, abstentions. Okay, so the resolution passes unanimously. Thank you. I used to have a pen here, yes. So moving to point number 7 on the agenda, which is to welcome the new chapters and 6, the special interest groups, to ISOC. So this time we are very happy to actually, welcome a bunch of them. So let me read them for you. The first one is Capítulo Canario de la Internet Society, which is the Internet Society Canary Islands chapter, the Internet Society Jamaica chapter, the Internet Society Lesotho chapter, the Internet Society US Hawaii chapter, the Internet Society Accessibility Special Interest Group, and the Internet Society Rural Development Special Interest Group. So we are very happy that both we can welcome chapters and special interest groups. So any discussions before we pass the resolution? So I need someone to move, Olga, and someone who second, Richard. So we're gonna pass this resolution by acclamation. Thank you. It's great to see, the interest of these groups to basically, join the Internet Society family. Moving on to point number 8, which is to recognize outgoing trustees. And as you know, every AGM, we basically set up the cycle for elections, selections, and we have some trustees joining. In this case, we already were welcoming yesterday Mike. Officially now he has become a trustee, like this morning, but we were already running the onboarding process, so it was great. But on the other hand, it's always sad to say goodbye to current trustees. So in this case, it was the turn for Haris and Desiree, who are here in the room. And as I was saying yesterday, dinner, we had a nice farewell dinner. I considered I'm losing 2 friends in the board. But anyway, as we said, we keep in touch, and it was really great to work with you guys. I think Desiree has been the longest serving trustee in ISOP, so she's a reference to all of us. And again, I mean, I want to stress my thank you for and all the trustees for all the work you guys have put on this. So with that, yes, we pass first the resolution. Okay, yeah. So first we pass the resolution, and then we do the ceremony. So I need someone to move, Walid, someone who seconds, Hiroshi, and obviously we're gonna pass this by acclamation. Okay, thank you, and you are of course invited to continue watching the session as observers. So let me see. So Jim, are we ready for the presentation? Because we are 15 minutes ahead, but I was wondering if. Okay. Okay, perfect. So let me check. Otherwise, I mean, we can continue the break until the remote participants, as I said before, they are ready. But let me look if we can move something. Okay. So I mean, we have 15 minutes, which is exactly what we allocated to pass the resolution tomorrow about our meetings next year. Anybody minds if we do it now? Okay, perfect. So then that was on the agenda. Point number 18, board meeting locations and dates for 2020. So let me introduce this. As usual, we have, that one. 4 meetings, which are the Q1 meeting, the AGM, a retreat, and Q4. So we were discussing back and forth the options, and the proposal that I think would be kind of okay with everyone, and we need to vote on, would be to have the Q1 meeting in Cancun. That would be collocated with the ICANN 67. And according to your preferences, it would be after the meeting, because before the meeting, some people had problems flying. So that would be Q1 meeting. Again, this is 2020. The AGM would be collocated with the IETF in Madrid, Spain. That was Cancun, Mexico, Madrid, Spain. And then the retreat, we would go to New York City in the US, and we are looking for a venue. And I was, when we have the venue, or we can confirm the options, we will basically look into that. And the Q4 meeting would be collocated with the IETF in their Asian meeting, which they haven't disclosed yet the location, but the idea would be to go there and have it collocated. It hasn't been publicly disclosed. Yeah.
I think it has.
It has already?
Yes.
Okay, so if it has already, then...
Bangkok.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So it would be in Bangkok, in Thailand. So any comments before we... Cancun, it's Madrid, then New York, and then Bangkok. Okay, And as usual, we collocate the meetings with meetings where most trustees are anyway, so that saves a bit of traveling and money and everything. So yeah, we also discussed, just for the record, the possibility of having a virtual meeting sometimes. I think a couple of years ago, actually, we did one. So when there's no like a substantial amount of significant topics to discuss, that's always a possibility. Okay, so we are ready, I guess.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Since I'm only going to be at 2 of those meetings, should we vote on each one independently, or it's a process point?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know. I mean, we were talking about that, but not to make things more complicated than they are. I think everybody can vote on the whole thing because, yeah. But I know that we discussed this point, and I decided against having like 4 different resolutions because then it's. I mean, if somebody wants to do that, we could do that, but I don't think it's necessary. Okay, great. So,
Question.
yes.
Can we also, just to be specific, include the dates in this resolution as well? Because we have to draw up hotel contracts and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I think Cancun is March 13th and 14th.
But to be clear, I mean, we don't have. I don't think we have to capture like the exact dates because sometimes, for example, the ITF, they do an experiment of not meeting on Friday, and then we would be kind of tying our hands because then we cannot move. At least my opinion is that it's enough to say that we are collocating with the ITF and it's going to be after. We are collocating with ICANN and it's going to be after. And we are going to New York City and it's going to be mid-September. And the dates, we had a poll there and we can decide them. Yeah, no, I know.
Okay, so we'll poll on the retreat dates.
Right.
Okay.
Is Bangkok before or after?
Bangkok is after. That's what seems to work for everyone. I think the main problem was ICANN because some people couldn't do it before because, I mean, in the ITF, we typically do it afterwards all the time, I think.
Yeah, the problem with ICANN is that the ICANN meeting sort of ramps up and different people arrive on different days.
Okay, yeah. Okay, good. So we have the resolution. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So John has a resolution and everybody is aware of what we are voting on. So can we proceed to approve it? Okay, so I need someone to move. Olga moves. Pepper seconds. Okay, so we're gonna do show of hands. Yes, no, abstain. Yes votes, please raise your hands. Abstentions, no votes. So the resolution passes unanimously. Thank you. This is something that we typically in the past didn't pass it by resolution, but since this time, we had discussions and everything, we thought it was good to capture the agreements that we have. Okay, good. So that was point 18 on the agenda. We will not tomorrow. We will I mean, yeah. So tomorrow, I mean, I intended to do all the appointments tomorrow, but maybe we can start by making some of them.
Yeah, well, actually, there's one appointment that's not on the agenda, which is you need to appoint Andrew to the PIR as PIR liaison. I actually found the place in the PIR bylaws, and you are correct. We can appoint anyone as long as the person promises to behave himself.
Okay, good. But okay, so we will prepare a resolution about that. So since we have agenda point number 20 with all the appointments, John will add that, so we will amend that for tomorrow, but I think we can make the appointment of in point number 19 already today, which is the board liaison to the ITF non-com. Is that okay with everyone? Yeah. Okay. So basically, the idea is to appoint the liaison to the ITF non-com, and the proposal is basically to appoint Richard Barnes to that committee. So I'm gonna need someone to move. Hans Peter and Sean seconds. So we're gonna do show of hands again. So everybody in favor, please raise your hands. Abstentions? No votes? So the resolution passes unanimously. And on this point, we have a bit of a process issue because since we usually appoint the liaison to the ITF non-com in the AGM before, well, some years we had the AGM before the summer ITF meeting, and so our liaison could already work with the non-com. This year, we basically have the AGM right after the ITF, so it would have been a pity not to be able to engage with the non-com because this cycle is quite important. So what we did was informally informing the ITF non-com that a chair that Richard could be there and talk to them and give them feedback. This is something that we may or may not work. Fix in the process. In the future, we could just have an e-vote in the board meeting that we have on the phone a few weeks before. So just for the record, that's the solution basically that we did, because basically this is exactly the same situation that we're gonna have next year in the Madrid ITF as we just approved. So yeah. But anyway, thanks again, Richard, for volunteer and this is important. An important position, and it's a lot of work with a lot of interviews. So we really appreciate your commitment. Thanks. Okay, good. So so it's 10:25. So do we know when Christelle is joining? Because okay, she's supposed to join in 5 minutes, right? Okay, so let's go. Okay, perfect.
We wait for the slides to come up. I'll just say thank you. Jim Galvin for the record, co-chair of the OMAC. My other co-chair is Crystal Dalshar with London Trust Media. We had a meeting yesterday, and she was here, but she had to go back last night.
Thank you. Yeah, so Jimmy's gonna give us the report from the OMAC. Yes.
So when he gets there, he can jump to slide number 2, and I'll just speak to it while we wait for it to come up. It's a list of activities and what we had been planning and what we actually have accomplished with respect to engaging with the OMAC. The top set indicates the set of meetings that we had sort of targeted to have. Some of the board members will remember from last year in Bangkok and in July when we had some OMAC meetings, we had suggested that we were going to try a little experiment with when to have OMAC meetings and what we would do with them. We actually did a poll of OMAC members, and there was no real, outstanding preponderance of anything in particular. So we ended up opting to have one meeting at each of the 4 key events that seem to co-locate with 4 key events that seem of interest to some consensus of OMAC members. So that's the RSA Data Security Conference, and then we would go to one IETF, one ICANN, and then the global IGF meeting. It seems that each of those would give us a little bit of overlap in some cases, but in theory, there would be a good chunk of the OMAC members who would be at each of those events. And so we would try to have a meeting at each one of those. The other thing that we had set ourselves up for was that we would only have a face-to-face meeting if there was actually substance and some real work to be done and something to be listened to. So as it turns out, we ended up canceling the first 2 OMAC meetings. The first one would have been at RSA Data Security, and the second one would have been at the ICANN meeting. And we ended up not having either one of those. We could not pull an agenda together that seemed substantive. The other key element of the agendas that we wanted to have, so we're trying to create a mechanism for engagement with ISOC staff and ISOC generally. And so one of the key things was we had set for ourselves an ask of ISOC staff, and that is whenever they had something that they wanted to bring to meetings, we wanted to make sure that it was an engaging discussion and that they would have an ask for us in particular. So any presentation they wanted to give, we're trying to get away from the model of just having meetings that were presentations from ISOC staff. So if they had just published a white paper or some other significant activity for which they had created any kind of communications as a result of it, the idea was if people were interested in that, they had plenty of channels for getting access to that information. And we didn't need to have a face-to-face meeting just to listen to someone tell us something that we could have all read and not had any real discussion about. There was no next step that went with it. So that was the primary reason for canceling the first 2 meetings. We didn't really have a topic. We ended up being able to pull a meeting together for yesterday. We had quite a vigorous discussion well, I'll come to that in the next slide, actually. And our plan is to try and have a meeting at the IGF. And again, it's going to be about whether or not we can find a good agenda item and a good discussion to have with folks. In addition to that, ISOC, as part of its general, reorganization, restructuring, the way it's repositioning itself, they in the membership group, they now have opportunities for creating engagement and creating smaller meetings rather than a giant face-to-face meeting like these kinds of meetings, big room and all the amenities that go with it and having this kind of thing. We had a number of meetups, if you will, or smaller events with some key people, whoever happened to be around. So even the meeting at RSA Data Security actually turned into a bit of a tech talk with Mozilla. So there were a couple of people around, and Mozilla came around, and ISOC just had a few people that got together in a room. And we had a bit of a partnership dinner. Again, there were just a few of us there and some senior staff from ISOC, and I think there might even have been a board member or two who was there at the time. And we just got together and had more of just an engaging conversation with that few people. One of the it was good to see ISOC being interested in wanting to create opportunities for greater engagement between people, OMAC members and the staff. And so these things fall into that. The second list there is the whole list of strengthening OMAC engagement. And ISOC has created a number of events along the way over the year that have created those opportunities. And I view those as a feature. Again, instead of having a big expensive OMAC meeting for just having opportunities to network and chit chat or listen to a presentation, we create these smaller opportunities and regional activities for folks, and that's worked out pretty well for us. So we're going to continue that into next year. We'll likely continue it into next year is what I should say. We're still going to ask on the OMAC list again and probably do another doodle poll like we did last year, just to see if we get any new information or if anything substantive changes. Honestly, not expecting anything, but we'll try again the same model, one meeting each at an ICANN, IETF, the RSA Data Security Conference, and IGF, and we'll give it another try and see how it goes. especially since we now have ISOC doing its other half with these smaller regional meetings. Want to give another opportunity for all of that to come together and be meaningful and see how it works out at the end of the year before we, make this a formal thing that we're doing. So considering the experiment to go forward and work like that. On to the next slide, please. And I've already done all the discussion about the OMAC meetings and our experiment as we had the last time. One key point I will add, one of the sub-bullets there about separating OMAC meetings from OMAC engagement. We're just, I mean, in some ways it's kind of a detail, it's an administrative point, it's a little bit of formality, but we are trying to be careful about what we designate as a full OMAC meeting and discussion versus ISOC just doing its job, if you will, in creating opportunities for engagement and events for its members and that kind of thing, for continuing forward with the work that it's doing. And we're just trying to emphasize that distinction. We did have a bit of a nominating committee discussion on the mailing list, as most of you should be aware. I believe all OMAC members, and I'm not sure when even the incoming members may or may not have joined yet, but board members are generally on the list. And so there was some discussion about, how to handle the relationship between the slate that comes from the org members and versus the slate that comes from the chapter members. We are actually going to try and bring that discussion up again. I want to bring it forward and find a way to come to a consensus and declare an OMAC position on that point. A number of people have been having discussions about it. Even being here at the ITF meeting this week, I can say that I've had several discussions with several people as kind of a follow-up to that discussion. So it seems like a good thing to actually create a real OMAC consensus position on, which is not something OMAC has done in a long time, but we'll take the time to do that. And we'll have that discussion there. So that's maybe consider this kind of a heads up to you, for board members who might want to be watching and paying attention to that discussion and see where that goes.
Yeah, and thank you, Jim. I mean, I mentioned that in yesterday's OMAC meeting, but I just for all trustees because not everybody were there actually. So yeah, exactly. The main purpose when we created the OMAC and the chapter advisory committee was that instead of individual chapters and organizations coming up with the ideas and then we don't know if that's an issue of one organization or two or there's a consensus, is that you guys actually work with the community, understand what is the main position, and then once you have basically agreed on something, we will consider it and do whatever is needed. So thanks a lot, and thanks for the heads up. I would encourage everyone to also look those mailing lists that all of you are subscribed to. So I think we are good for now.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you also yesterday for the reminder during the OMAC meeting, because it really did come up only under any other business, so it was sort of at the end of it. The last major bullet point there was just about our meeting yesterday. We had, quite a vigorous discussion yesterday. Andrew jumped into a ball pit for us, and that was a lot of fun. I'm sure there are movies around somewhere. But Andrew started something.
I wasn't the only person jumping in that ball pit. There's definitely a photo of you too.
Yes, well, this is true. This is true. I admit it. There were several people who took advantage of the ball pit. It was a lot of fun. I think we need one of those in here, I suspect. More seriously, though, a year ago, when even just after I had, with Crystal, had taken over co-chair of the OMAC, and then Andrew came on board, one of the first things that Andrew did when we had the first OMAC meeting with him as the new CEO was to start something called the Ask Me Anything session. And so, given that we were having a meeting at this an OMAC meeting here, Andrew again came to an OMAC meeting and offered an Ask Me Anything session. I just want to call it out because I really think that it is just an awesome thing. It's an excellent thing that Andrew does that. And in all of my years, I don't know that any CEO has done that before. And so it's really quite exciting to have that opportunity for that kind of engagement. We got a couple of good questions, and all of that was really a good thing, and it was nice. So I'm sure that Andrew seems committed to continuing to do those things, and that's a good thing. Whenever we have an OMAC meeting, we can have him in the same place, that would be good. We had quite a vigorous discussion from Christine Runiger and Robin Wilton, who talked about encryption, security, exceptional access, and some of the policy issues that are going on around the world. And ISOC's position on these things is kind of an alert to the community that there is some activity that they might want to care about. And we had quite a bit of vigorous discussion about it. And of course, the ask was from staff. The ask of the org members who were present at the time was, what are you going to do? What is your role going to be in this? Because ISOC is moving in a particular direction here in its activities around the world on this particular point. So I got excellent feedback from anyone who came to me and anyone that I asked about that presentation. So I think that was one of the more excellent topics of discussion that we had. We also had a brief update from Olaf Kolkman about the cyber report and where that is. So that was helpful and good to know, to be kept up to date on that activity. And of course, we had a membership program update from Andrew. So the board, Andrew and staff have they started a new process again for moving up for revising the membership program. At least the org members are very appreciative of what's been going on there and how that has worked. I know that even Andrew said this yesterday, he didn't get as many interviews and one-on-one discussions as they would have liked from org members, but I do know that some participated. I know that I participated, and so they got some feedback from a few people. But clearly, they had been listening to the community nonetheless. And I know you're going to hear more about that here, so I won't dwell on it here, except to say thank you and from the org members and anyone that I talked to, and they said it in the room yesterday too, are very appreciative of the process that's in play here for getting to a revised membership program. And what we have seen in terms of what's being done has been well received. And a few people acknowledged it yesterday, and I've gotten some other feedback that suggests that it's a good thing. So definitely want to acknowledge that to the board, that the path that we're headed on and the process by which we're getting there is appreciated, and just want to acknowledge that. And also from the staff too. I have to say that working with Anita and Joyce in particular has really been exceptional on behalf of the organizational member advisory council. So thank you very much for all of that. There will be a written report that we will produce to provide all this to the board. Just because we had a meeting yesterday and the time frame was kind of short, we didn't really get all of that together. But for the historical record, we will get a written document that will come to you. So I probably should have said this in the beginning. Here we just have these few bullet points as an opportunity to raise some comments to you for you to hear as far as where we are and what we've been doing. So with that, I think the next slide just has Crystal and myself, our contact information. I mean, as always, I'm happy to talk to, get feedback from, or if you have questions, happy to take those now or at any point in the future. And I know that Crystal is too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And also, I mean, as we discussed yesterday, the work on the restructuring of the membership, with the tires and everything, I think that's important work, and you guys are following, and that I think shows that the organization is responsive to the comments and requests of the org members. So I think that relationship has been strengthened, and I'm looking forward to seeing where we end up with that structure. So and as you said, the engagement also of the OMAC members. Any questions for Jim or comments? Olga, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim, very much for the report. I was yesterday at the meeting. I have a question about these regional meetings, which I think it intends to be outreach, not meetings exactly of the OMAC. There are several well-attended meetings at the regional level. I don't know if you manage that with the regional bureau, or you have to fly people from far away places, but if it's the regional bureau, maybe we had this big meeting in Cordoba. Pepper was there, the CLT, very well attended. or LACNIC meetings in Latin America. So maybe you can also think about, apart from IGF, which is perhaps not that big as other meetings, that could be a good place to gather attention. We have tried to bring OMAC members to, it's not easy in a region that it's developing, and but we have managed to convince some of them to be part of the group. So that could be a good place. Of course, you have also the chapters that can give you some advice on which meetings are around. Thank you.
Pepper.
Again, thanks. And yesterday's meeting was actually quite good. Although, again, it is disappointing that there were more ISOC staff members than OMAC members. But that's something that we're working on, which we've talked about. But picking up on Olga's point, the CLT, for example, is a really great example of where we could have had an OMAC meeting. We had, I think there were 2 ISOC staff there at least, involved in presentations, engaged. So ISOC actually already had a presence, but there was no, and it was a large meeting with a lot of people. And so that would have been a great opportunity for a regional OMAC meeting. I frankly have a question about Bolivia, because you're not going to get a lot of private sector companies that are the OMAC members going to Bolivia. So I actually question the utility of that one that's on the list. I mean, I think that there's some, you know, in any case, that's just an observation.
Please.
Well, the reason for Bolivia is the regional IGFs, which somehow makes sense. But I totally agree with you that there will be very, very few OMAC members or potential OMAC members in that meeting. And the CLT was a huge meeting. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend because it collapsed with other activities I had. Also, LACNIC meetings are huge meetings with a lot of companies attending. I'm not saying that the IGF it's a bad idea, the regional IGF, but I think it could be complemented with other presence that already exist, because there was some ISOC staff in Córdoba.
And, you know, there's a whole separate discussion about IGF and some of the regional IGF meetings and utility for OMAC members. So I just question. I'm happy to take it offline and talk about that one in terms of the efforts required, and it's just about an ROI, right? You're going to have people. You're going to have a meeting. You're going to have to bring people. And just the return on that one, I think, is going to be extremely low. I just question whether it's worth the time, people, resources, travel to do that. But again, it's a judgment call. I mean, you look at it and say, oh, it's not a regional IGF meeting, cool. But not all regional IGF meetings or not all regional meetings are actually equal in terms of the return on the effort required to have a meeting of members. That's all.
Thank you. Any more? Jim, you want to answer? Yes, please.
If I may, thank you, Olga and Pepper. Let me offer 2 comments about this discussion about when and where to have meetings and why. One of the things that's really important to me, and I know that Krista and I have spent quite a bit of time talking about this, and we do try to work this through with Anita, is we want meetings to be engaging and want to make sure that they're interactive and they're useful for the members. So we're focused at the moment on meetings serving the broad set of OMAC members. And we're not focused on trying to divide up the members into groups and finding ways to deal with them in particular. So, you know, creating an engagement meeting and using that as a criteria is often, you know, kind of an issue. Because as you can see, we've already did not have 2 of the face-to-face meetings we thought we would have. We just couldn't get enough people together that, you know, actually wanted to have a significant face-to-face interactive session on an issue. The second comment is on this issue of regional meetings. For the moment, the line that we're choosing to draw, and it really is just a choice, we kind of have to watch how this develops and how it happens, is not to try and have regional meetings and call them OMAC meetings in particular, which is why we're very supportive of what ISOC is doing with its engagement activities and calling them in that context. And that way, ISOC can reach out to OMAC members who might, otherwise be in the area, and ISOC can have an event, and it can provide an opportunity for engagement of whatever type that it wants to create, rather than a meeting of substance that we might call an OMAC meeting. Frankly, to be honest, we're having enough trouble just trying to get the broader global set of OMAC members organized enough to want to be involved. I'm not inclined to try and figure out how to divide us up into regions and figure out how to get us involved and engaged. I'm more inclined at the moment to let ISOC, pick up that side of it with its regional bureaus and the activities going on there. I know, speaking personally for myself, the regional bureaus and some of the stuff that they do is really quite exciting and really nice. And I'd rather let that develop and let ISOC develop its membership engagement in that way. And we'll just focus the OMAC meetings on the broader set of us, and hopefully we'll meet in the middle somewhere along the way. So I'm not gonna push in the direction of regional meetings just yet. I want to wait to see how ISOC's regional bureau engagement all develops, and hopefully after another year of experimenting, I call it. This is what I said to Christo when we first took the job. We'll just experiment for a couple of years and see what works. And if we have some success, maybe we'll do it again. And if we don't, we'll move on and let someone else be chair and let them try something else. So that's some thoughts about that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Tim. Any other questions? Andrew.
Just to follow up on this a little bit as well, I think that it's important to remember that the Internet Society staff are really sort of responsible for attracting. That's part of the reason that we have partnership and community engagement staff and so on, is to make sure that we are that we provide the mechanism by which we can engage new members and potentially grow the membership. So I don't think of it as the responsibility of the OMAC, for instance, to try to expand our regional membership of organization members, but instead it's really the staff's job to make sure that we're an attractive organization, because I think what Jim, if I can paraphrase you, is suggesting is that you have the meeting when the interest is there, rather than having the meeting to try to drive the interest. So what we're trying to do is actually expand the membership more generally. And if we were able to attract a large number of organization members in the LAC region, for instance, then probably at a regional IGF, you would discover that there were a number of people there was critical mass, and it would be trivial to have a meeting. The problem right now is that it's not trivial to have a meeting anywhere, as Jim already pointed out, and that's because we as an organization are letting our membership down. I feel that we're not actually offering enough value that people are engaged with us, and so that's what I regard our professional staff, the job that we have to deliver on, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later today in the meeting. But I want to acknowledge that I think the OMAC is working as hard as can be expected of volunteers to be driving that interest. And really, what we have to do as an organization, across the organization, I don't merely mean the professional staff, we need to be so interesting that people want to come to these meetings, and then it's easy to have a meeting because we're doing such interesting stuff. I thought that, for instance, the discussion around encryption yesterday was something that was really quite good. There was some optimism there, but also a set of challenges that are very, very serious. And what that, of course, means is that if we can engage with our membership in order to do that kind of thing, then over time we make the membership bigger, because people recognize, hey, those ISOC people, they're working hard to make the internet for everyone. And that to me is the positive dynamic that I hope we can work. So thank you very much for the work in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And yesterday we had a discussion, regarding another topic, but it's the same thing, that's the order in which we have to do things. Absolutely. I fully agree. Doing like small band-aids and trying to fix things, it's not going to work. It's better to just work, bottom up. Okay, so thank you, Jim. Thanks a lot for the presentation and for the meeting yesterday. And well, we keep in touch, and thanks for the heads up as well.
And thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, excellent. So the next, and we again apologize for the meeting management, time management this morning, but since we have so many remote presenters, I'm always in touch with Kevin. He tells me when people join, and Jason joined a few minutes ago, so now we can go into agenda point number 10. So Jason, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. You can hear me all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Very loud and clear, in fact. So thank you, and the floor is yours.
Sure, thanks. And apologies in advance if the internet access gets a bit spotty. I'm on Wi-Fi where I am. So thanks everyone for your time. My name is Jason Livingood, and I'm chair of the ITF LLC board. And long ago served on the ISOC board, so I definitely understand all the things that you're going through today, and congratulations on the new members for the AGM. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Great, so let me adjust my screen here. So these are the board members. The board, this is the first full board. We kicked off at the March ITF meeting. So we're quite new. The LLC was formed really 1 year ago in August of last year, and then there was an interim board until March of this year. And at that point, this first full board is the one that took over. So Maya Anjolkovic, Alyssa Cooper, myself, Sean Turner, and Peter Van Rosta. So some of you may know Peter. He heads up Center in Europe, has a lot of experience in this community. And Maya is at the World Bank, a lot of expertise in fundraising and sponsorship and so on. Knows the internet space well also. And of course, Alyssa and Sean are longtime core members of ITF, and so you probably know them quite well. Next slide. So just in passing here, what we've been trying to do is really to satisfy the community's request for more transparency about what we're working on and when we're meeting and so on. And so we are trying to do a few things. One is publish our agendas and of course our meeting dates very far in advance to give people an opportunity to provide us feedback and to participate and so on. Next slide, please. So we've gotten a lot of work done. We're in this really intensive initial phase of bootstrapping the organization. And so there's just an awful lot of work to be done, very foundational work. We really kicked off in May with a few days of face-to-face meeting. And one of the first things that we started off with that Peter guided us through was an analysis of our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which is really kind of an internally focused assessment, and then an externally focused one, which is the political, economic, social, and technical challenges. So trying to sort of start off with, okay, we know we have a lot of work to do, but what are the strengths of the organization? What are the things that we need to worry about? What things may happen outside of the organization that will influence us? And of course, one of those things we can see at number 7, which is the change in the US political environment with new export regulations that pertain to Huawei, for example. We've issued a bunch of RFPs, which are really critical right now. I'll talk about some of those later. We began a search for a permanent ITF executive director, set up a lot of insurance coverages as we've moved off of ISOC's coverages onto our own. And we began some consultations, and I'm going to talk about all these later on. So I think we can skip to the next slide. We have a lot to do in the near future. This is really our goal for the next roughly 4 months. Hiring an executive director, job number 1, finishing policies, our first budget as a full board, and a bunch of RFPs. So lots and lots of work there, some of which I'll touch on in the upcoming slides. Next, please. So this is the current fiscal operating budget. We sort of inherited the budget structure, if you will, from the interim board, and not boring you with the details right now. I think the key bottom line is we're on budget, on target for the year. There's nothing unexpected that's arisen. So the interim board did a good job of setting us up with an appropriate budget. And I think this year we'll probably break out into more detail, and this is just a summary, of course, but into more detail some of the categories so that we can be more transparent with the ITF community. The important thing here as well is this is the first year that we're having to live within our means, if you will. So we have to set a budget and we have to meet that budget. And in all the prior years, as an ITF, there was always the ability to, well, if we went over budget and we had more costs and the revenue wasn't what we wanted, we would always come back to ISOC and say, oh, oops, at the end of the year, we need to have a budget hole filled. And really, this is the first step, the first year in saying we're going to live within our financial budget, and we have to manage our costs more appropriately, manage our revenues, and importantly, have to start making with our community cost-benefit decisions. And that's a new thing for the community, so it'll be interesting. Next slide, please. We also have an operational reserve, and that was part of the Internet Society helping us getting bootstrapped. Nothing much to say there. Mostly this is just letting our community know that we do have one. Next slide. And the endowment, thanks very much. I know this was a commitment that was made to transition from the Internet Society to the IETF, the endowment. And that commitment was made maybe a year or so ago, and so we've just gotten that done. Really appreciate all the help from ISOC staff to get that completed. And we'll be doing much more detailed reporting to our community about the size of that endowment and where we're going. So roughly the amount of money in right now is about $3 million US. And the important things to bear in mind here, one, we've communicated with all our major donors that this transition was happening. And we are now going to begin a process that I think Maya will likely lead us through because of her experience doing similar things at World Bank, to develop an investment policy strategy to guide where the money is invested, but more importantly, to guide what's our strategy for fundraising, what's our financial target, who are the types of organizations that we're going to pursue. And that's a really critical process to go through before we start to refocus on, again, raising funds. And so that will take a few months to get through thoughtfully, but will likely lead to new organizations being targeted, whether those are foundations or governments or what have you, and certainly large companies and individuals as well. Next slide, please. So the major service that we have, the major service provider, is from what we call the Secretariat. So the Secretariat services, they're the ones running our meetings and doing all of that execution. It's an incredibly important part of making sure that the ITF is working. And originally, when I came onto the board and the rest of us came on, we realized that the main contract was set to expire at the end of October, and we felt that was sort of unnecessarily risky for two reasons. One, that was a mere 3 weeks or so before an ITF meeting, and the prospect of potentially changing the Secretariat right before a meeting seemed a little bit risky. And as well, it just seemed a bit rushed from an RFP and a selection process. And the current provider, which is AMS, is doing a great job, so it's not a criticism of them, but it was planned to put this out to RFP. The other important thing that we're doing is over time in that contract, we've had lots of other add-on services put into the contract, and that's made things honestly a little bit complicated. And so I'll use an example of like IT support services. If we wanted to make a change in something there, it required going back and changing a lot of things in the underlying main agreement, and then you'd realize only later on, oh, there were 3 other things that were also affected. And so we think from a simplicity standpoint, it makes sense to break these out into individual contracts that will make them easier to manage. And so that's one of the things we're doing. And of course, you may have one provider winning several of those things, but I think the simplicity of being able to put them in individual contracts will be a lot easier for us. Next slide, please. So this is the big work effort for us, the search for an executive director. And the big news here is we had 134 applications, which honestly blew our minds. We thought or worried perhaps that we would have too few applicants, and so we did a lot of outreach, and I have to say we were humbled by the level of interest. And those applicants are all, or many of them, most of them, very, very qualified. And for us, we felt it was just an incredible statement about the value of the ITF for the community and for the internet as a whole, and the fact that we could really get that level of interest for people with those kinds of qualifications, we thought was fantastic. So we've been in the process of whittling those candidates down. We've actually used the same recruitment firm that that you all used when you did your CEO search, and so they've been great so far. And we're really in the process now of arriving at not just a short list, but sort of the finalist list, if you will. And because there are so many, qualified folks, that may take a bit longer in terms of when the selection may be made. But we're planning to do that certainly before the end of the year, and hope to complete that transition before end of year. Next slide. So a policies consultation. I should say at the outset, one of the things that the ITF community was particularly worried about was that we would sort of go off and make decisions somewhat unilaterally and wouldn't involve them to the extent that they wanted. And so the first big thing that we had to do was to establish conflicts of interest policies, anti-harassment, whistleblower policies, and so on. Some of those legally required and covered under our memorandum of agreement between ISOC and the LLC, but others that we felt were best practices for an organization. And so the first thing that we had to do was establish what will the process be for consulting with our community, and how will we be really transparent and allow a lot of comment. And so that was sort of the first order of business. And then we really did a sort of test run, as it were, with policies for this. And so the first thing we did was created a project on GitHub, which is where we put all of our documents. People could create issues there. And a lot of our community are very comfortable with GitHub, so we wanted to use a tool that they were conversant with. At the same time, people love email lists, and they've used those for years at the ITF and elsewhere, of course. And so we established a consultations email list as well, and accepted comments there in addition to GitHub. To kick off the process, we convened a webinar and conducted that, and then we recorded that so that people that weren't able to join because of perhaps the time zone we were in, they could do that and watch it later on. And then we opened a 4-week comment period to allow enough time for people, especially given summer vacations for those in the Northern Hemisphere, to comment. And then right now we're in a process of reviewing all the comments, and we will be making revisions to policies. And I don't think that we had any really foundational comments that would require going back out to the community. But if necessary, we will sort of rerun that consultation process, and it's sort of TBD. And then the last thing that I should note, especially because I know the Internet Society, because of the agreement we have, requires many of these policies, maybe a couple comments. One is that it's one thing to put the policies in place and say that we have a policy, but it's important for us to have a compliance program to make sure that we are checking up regularly, that we are complying with them, but importantly to make sure that we're doing the right training and communication with the people that are affected by those policies so that they truly understand them, they understand why they're in place, and what they need to do to comply with them. And then finally, I would say in particular around conflict of interest and code of conduct, we have tried to set a very high bar for our community and for the people that are affected by those policies, because we know that it can be very easy for conflicts to arise, and it really goes to the heart of establishing trust with our community. And so we've tried to set a very high bar and go on above and beyond even what maybe ISOC's policies are in some of these areas. So we'll see. Next slide, please. So we've got lots of ways that we can be contacted, and this is sort of the sort of litany of all of those. In essence, this is about us being very, very transparent with our community about how to contact us, how to reach out to us, and so on. And one of the things that you'll see added in the future, once the policies are finished, we will also have a contact form for whistleblower contacts. If people feel that they have observed some sort of conflict of interest or some other sort of ethical problem or harassment problem, may be able to contact us to report that either anonymously or by name. So that'll be coming in the future, and of course the policies link. So that's it. I think the final slide is just thank you. Thank you for certainly your time today, but of course for your support of the LLC. Obviously, we are a part of the Internet Society as an organization, as a disregarded entity, and we think there's a lot of continuing alignment with the Internet Society, and we appreciate very much the long-term support that you're providing for us and the work that we do. And I'm happy to take any questions if you have them.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jason. I think this is a great summary of what you guys have done. And I myself was serving in the initial board. And I mean, the first thing I told Jason is that they were going to be extremely busy this first month.
Yeah.
And I think that was true because they have done a lot of things. And thanks a lot for actually, pushing on those action points. Some of them are extremely important for the future of the IETF. So I would like to open the mics for questions. Any questions for Jason? Seeing none. It was kind of comprehensive, presentation.
Good.
So
No, I
Okay,
just want
Mike.
I just want to compliment Jason. That was just an excellent presentation. That was really well done. I feel like
Thanks.
I have a complete picture, and I just wanted to jump in and say that.
Great, thank you.
yeah, no, I mean, I think, yeah, you covered most of the questions in the presentation. So don't take this as lack of interest. I think people,
Right.
people. Okay, John has a question.
It's my favorite topic. Which is, yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, this really, it's clear that even though this is like jumping on a horse while it's running, that the horse does seem to be more or less under control. And I'm just wondering, to what degree do you have, do you know what the plan is for the endowment? It's like it's too small, too big to ignore, but too small to be a significant contributor to the budget.
Yeah, so on the endowment, I think, the few key things that are really in front of us, I think go to where we want to go in the future, which is, I think we want to grow it. We want to grow it very substantially, which probably means over time that we want to be at a level of funding over 100 million US dollars. If we really believe that there should be enough sort of investment income and interest and whatnot that could potentially fund regular operations for the ITF. It also says that we very likely are going to need to target the kinds of organizations that we have never really routinely had contact with. We think there are a lot of those out there that would be potentially interested in supporting this kind of effort. We think that we've got a really great story behind it. And so, we think that will be a good strength for us, but we know that it's going to take a lot to decide how to focus in different regions of the world and to have, rather than a uniform approach that we would apply everywhere to every sort of target audience, if you will, or every prospect, it's going to probably have to vary by region and by sector, whether that's a nonprofit sector, a government sector, a commercial edge provider sector, and you name it. And so how to hone that sort of marketing strategy or sales strategy, if you will, is going to be a big focus. And then, how do we have people that are out doing that fundraising, and how do we incentivize them to do that? That's, I think, going to be complicated and take a bit of time to figure out.
What sort of schedule we were talking about? This clearly is multi-year, right?
Yeah, it is. I think the initial process that Maya will be leading us through, because of her background doing similar things at World Bank, is sort of developing and leading us through development of that strategy and that targeting and where do we want to go financially. And of course, Sean, as our treasurer, helping devise what's the investment policy or investment strategy, how do all those dollars get invested over time. So I think, realistically, we're 4 or 5 or 6 months away from really having a firm strategy, and then what the tactics are to get there will take a bit of time. And honestly, we're pausing it a little bit because we feel the higher priority is hiring a really strong permanent executive director.
Absolutely.
And having that person be a key part of leading us through this. And so we want to sort of get that done first and have them involved very closely in the development of, what the strategy and execution will be, because they're going to own a lot of the execution.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Oh, okay, perfect. So,
Great.
Jason, thanks again, and well, we keep in touch on all those issues. So
sounds good. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your time in Montreal, and au revoir.
And yeah, thank you. Bye bye, Jason.
Bye bye.
Excellent. Okay, so now we are moving to the next point on the agenda, and Eduardo joined. So Eduardo, can you hear me? We cannot hear you, so keep talking until we fix that.
Can you hear me?
Now it's perfect. Okay, so Eduardo is going to give us the report on the chapter advisory committee. So
just give me a moment to pull up his slides.
Oh yeah, just hold a second, Eduardo.
Okay, thank you so much.
So we are so jealous, Eduardo. We are here stuck indoors, and there it looks so nice.
Oh, because of the background. Yes, I have a house in the country. I come here during the weekends.
Okay, very nice.
Wait
yeah. And thanks for taking the time during the Saturday, actually. Yeah, of course.
No problem. No problem. Okay. My pleasure.
Okay, so Kevin is putting them up. Okay, so then we have the slides there. So the floor is yours, Eduardo.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I want to thank the Board of Trustees today for allowing me to report on the work that we have been doing and we are doing in the Chapter Advisory Council. I just want to make a caveat here that the things I'm going to present here are not necessarily my opinions. This is a presentation about the work we do and the things that we have been discussing. So, if I mention myself, think that is the whole group, okay? And feel free to stop me anytime and if you have any question. So the next one, please. Okay, thank you. Basically, I'm going to show you who are the committee members, just for your information. There's nothing different there. And we're going to talk about the work that we're doing on the advice. We have created a new advice template to make a simple way of communicating and make it formal, so we don't get lost in translation. And what that means is when we send mails and advice, we know which advice we are talking about. And give you an idea of the current work that we're doing on the advice and some of the advice that we're working on and discussing, and some things to look ahead. So we can move to the next slide, please. So just for information, this is the same group that was there last time. So we can go to the next one. Okay, so what we did is from now on, when we send an advice to you or staff, we're going to use this template, which is very simple. We have the title of advice, the year, month, day, and count if there is more than one advice in that specific date. For example, advice 2019-013-01, and the advice, the title of the advice. And the day that was created, inside the advice, there will be the date of that the advice was created and the transmittal story, so we can find out, how this document has been transmitted to you, coming back, and so forth. We can keep a track. If this SC committee is not here next year, then they can, whoever comes into this group will be able to track where this document is. Also, we're going to provide the background information, supporting the documentation, any consultation that we have done with the chapter ACs and so forth. So, and the actual advice that we want to, if there is an advice and recommendation. So this is what we're going to try it, and this is the way we are developing the advice from now on. And that's the way, if you look at the files and documentation in the steering committee box area, you will see those advices that we're working on using this type of template. So if you don't have any questions, this is just so you know, everybody knows.
So this is, I mean, it's great to add clarity, as you said, so that we don't drop the ball on anything. I mean, what I didn't get is like, will this be kind of in a tracking system, or you will send it by email, or?
No, we don't have any tracking system. It's just that if we send this by email to, let's say, the BOT secretary as formal advice, you know, every time we have emails going back and forth, we can address the right advice on that email, basically.
I see.
Because what we have seen before is that we send you an email, it comes back, goes there, then we send another one, and we don't know what we were talking about. It's very hard to follow.
Okay.
Basically, that's the idea behind this. There's nothing complicated. It's just so we can.
Yeah.
You know,
it's like a
we
format.
talk about any specific advice. We all. Yes, it's just a format. That's
okay.
There's
Thank
no
you.
System behind.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
Thank you. So, okay, so we can go to the next slide. On this one, this is an advice that was sent to the BOT before, and there was some emails going back and forth, and it has to do with the changes, to the proposed changes to the chapter advisory committee charter, and this advice was put on hold. As you may know, we have this informal talk, I guess a few weeks ago. The process that was followed to reach whatever consensus was reached at that time to make these changes was not the correct process. There was a process already in the charter. If you look section 10, where it says that you have to do these changes and approve them in a regular meeting, you know, conference call, and they have to be. You have to have 2/3 of the delegates voting there, being by proxy or attending the call in order to approve this. This was not done that way. This was done virtually, you know, and people voted or reached consensus virtually. That's how it was approved, and this is correct. It didn't follow procedure. So the current SC committee team decided to put this on hold because, you know, there are no critical changes to the charter. I mean, we can work with the charter the way it is. It might not be as efficient as we may want, but it's something that we can work on. And we don't want to. We decided that we didn't want to spend time in doing this at this time. We wanted to focus on something different. We want, which, you know, this whoever wants to bring this up again is there, but. And they have to make sure that it has to be done this way, the way the charter does. So I'm just want to inform you that we have put this on hold. So there will be no more emails regarding this.
Okay, thank you, Eduardo. Thanks.
Okay, so the next one, please. The next one is a discussion topic that, wow, man, we opened this since the beginning of almost the beginning of the steering committee, or after the first year. We have been working on this for the past 2 years. So basically, the idea was to get some kind of fellowship people that were local to the IETF meeting. You know, if they go to X country, you know, people of that country could go there and waive their meeting registration. A long story short, staff suspended that because there's a new fellowship strategy in place, and basically it was concluded that the project was not successful. So we have closed this discussion topic, and because we don't want to spend more time on something that has been suspended and concluded that was not successful, especially now that there is a new strategy. So are there any questions about this?
No, I think it makes sense, as you said. I mean, we're restructuring everything, so it doesn't make much sense to follow up on that. So thanks for the status update.
Yeah, so that's something that we don't want to, we're moving out of our discussion. So the next advices are, whoops, I have my own, hold on a second. The next advice, it's, are things that we're doing, they're in progress. And the first one has to do with ISO chapters, gatherings, and industry events. And this has to do with the fact that there wasn't, I think it was ICANN in Kobe, that ISO, even ISO, the Board of Trustees was there. There were many chapters, because you may know that there are many chapters, ISO chapters that participate in ICANN, as large structures and otherwise. And we always found very, when the chapters, and find very good time, since we are all together there, most of us or some of us are together in these meetings, and I'm taking ICANN as an example, to meet, and not only to meet and networking with each other, but to meet and meet staff people from ISOC that we hear we hear their name, we see them in emails, but we don't know them personally. And sometimes some of the staff people go to these meetings, and they just we don't know they're there, or people don't know them. So we are working on putting some background information on this, and we're going to basically recommend that ISOC do some kind of formal or informal meeting in major industry events. What are major industry events? Well, there's something that we need to define, and see how it goes. There is the last meeting in ICANN that was in Marrakech. Christine helped us in talk to the local chapter, and they put together a little get together. And I don't know if you have seen the pictures. There were more than 20 or 30 people there, from chapters that participated in ICANN and the local chapters. And it was a great networking event. We already sending comments about how this can be improved, because I think there should be something set at the beginning about, from the local chapter and who other chapters are there, so we can set the mood for the rest of the occasion. So that was very good. And that's the type of thing we are looking at and discussing, and I think it will be very effective in the sense of, engaging and meeting people that we don't have any other chance to meet personally. So this is one of the advice that we're working on. We are under this discussion still, and so once we finish with our discussion and get comments from the chapter, we will get back to you on this. Are there any questions on this?
So Andrew, and then Hans-Peter.
Thank you for this. This is really interesting, but I think a couple of questions that immediately come to my mind, which would be helpful to understand. First of all, it would help me to know, to understand this a little better, if I understood what ISOC-led meant. So from my point of view, the Internet Society is not just the staff, but it's in fact the entire organization. And the example that you were just giving actually was a gathering that was led by the chapter, right? The staff really didn't have very much to do with that. And I thought that was a great thing, that the local chapter wanted to do something in conjunction with this thing that was happening locally, and the staff didn't. We were happy to help with coordination on mailing lists and so on, but that the staff have certain events that the staff plans events for that are widely announced, and then other things happen that the community organizes itself and so on. So if that's what you mean by ISOC-led, I think that's a great thing. I'm just trying to understand that. The second thing that would help me is to understand what major industry events are, because this is a big industry, and I can think of a lot of different things there. So those are two things that would be really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, we have one of the things we need to define this somehow. Major industry. I agree with you. It's everything. So it's not that. So and in fact, we're working with Christine on they want some kind of list of events and things like that. So we will narrow that to something that makes sense. And it's effective. We don't want to go everywhere and do this. Just whenever there is a need for doing it. And like you said, yes, this can be chapter-led with the help of staff, some kind of coordination. No problem. That's exactly what happens in Marrakech. So thank you so much. Any other questions?
Yes, Hans-Peter.
Yeah, it's more procedural one. When do you expect that your discussion will be finished and this advice will be put forward to staff and us?
I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that question. But it will be sooner than later, because we have been talking about this starting this year. And this is not something, there's nothing convoluted under with this advice. Just an advice and see how it goes. So my personal expectation that it will be done before the end of this year.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Eduardo? No? Okay, Eduardo, and thanks a lot. And then Eduardo and I always, have regular calls one-on-one so that, we can, basically he keeps me up to date. I keep him updated as well. So I think the communication channel is quite useful, and let's continue doing that.
Okay, thank you. The next one, please. This has to do with the ISOC Fellowship Program. This is something that we have been talking about even before the new strategy, fellowship strategy came out. And basically it has to do with the IGF and the fact that only the fellowship programs for IGF were focused only to the youth. And there is this general feeling around that about age discrimination, giving opportunities to people over 40. There are many people out there that can be engaged with the IEF, and there are other things that are, I don't know all the details, but it will be part of the background that we have put together. And basically, we have been discussing this since 2 or 3 months ago, and then the new fellowship program came in, and I just wanted to talk to you about that at the end, but this is something that you will see coming in for consideration, maybe not this, now, but maybe in the future years when, things get reviewed. So that's what I have to say about this.
Yeah. So what is the, I mean, if you could clarify a bit, because at some point we discussed that, right?
Yes.
So your point is that age should be a factor, but not a definite factor, or shouldn't be taken into account, or, I mean, just to understand the discussions going on.
What we want to see is a fellowship program for the IEF that is not age cap limited. Okay. So everybody can participate. Right now, it's age cap at 40. So you're between 18 and 40. You're off. You're on your own. And these fellowships, I know their new program is looking for effectiveness and so forth for young leaders, which is okay. I mean, I think that's a great way of looking at. But there are 45,000 plus chapter members out there, and some one way of engaging them in ISOC work, not only in at the global level but local level, is to allow them to go to this type of activities and see for themselves what discussion about IGF is all about, meet all the people that are involved in this arena, and getting it from there. That's all I can say. Basically.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, like our way of thinking, and I know that we have been discussing this in the board, is that I mean, there's different factors, and it's not easy to come up with a simple room for that. But I mean, I think what we discussed is, like, let's say that we were to look at the curriculum. I mean, there's no way like a 20-year-old guy is going to have the curriculum of a 50-year-old guy in terms of experience and things like that. If you are looking at publications, the same thing. So in that sense, it's a matter of kind of, giving them a program that is tailored for the youth. I mean, as you explained. So, but well, I mean, like we can discuss those points when there's a clear position or.
Yeah, I understand. One of the things that we look at, and we use the ICANN as an example again, because most of all participate there. They have 2 different programs. They have one fellowship program for everyone.
Right.
And they have one that's called the Next Gen, which is targeted university students that are doing research on internet issues. And those are targeted to that population because they want to engage them. Basically, I mean that's the thing.
Okay, but because that was basically my question. If you were challenging the program or saying that we need to tackle that different population in a different way, because maybe I mean you're right that one size doesn't fit all.
I'm going to talk about, when we got at the end of the towards the end, I'm going to talk about the new fellowship strategy.
Okay, so then maybe we can continue. Okay.
Continue there. This is all, interrelated. So, are there any other questions about this? Am I okay with time, Kevin?
On time, you're fine.
No,
Okay.
you're fine. You
So
still
let me know when.
You still have 15 minutes.
Okay, so I will finish before that. So next one, please. Oh yeah, you have it there. This is a relatively new topic that was brought by one of the team members. And basically, she's concerned, this is Susana Gray from San Francisco. But she brought this as a concern to the group that she was looking for the non-com, and here we're talking about the non-com that the Board of Trustees put together to manage the process of finding
to put together the slate, yes, the nom. We call it the ISOC non-com, yes.
The ISOC non-com, and there is nothing published about how the people that participate in this non-com, how are they selected?
So they are selected by the board.
Okay, but there's nothing published there. They're selected by the board, including the chapter representative that participates there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things that we have needed to discuss that we are starting to think about is that maybe we want to have a process where the chapters recommend a few people for the Board of Trustees to select from.
Yes.
I think this is more transparent, and if this process, of selection, I don't know if you have a process of selection or do you just appoint people by the finger. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. So I can Eduardo, because this is a really good point, and actually I meant to bring it up with you at the end, because we have been discussing with Jim and the OMAC as well. So with the organization people, and I think that you are completely right. And the future, as I see it, would be that both OMAC and you guys basically put together, a group of individuals to serve in a non-com. Then we will have probably trustees as well to make sure that the process is okay and to see how the process goes. And then, put together the slate that the communities will vote on. So now the discussion with the org members has been that they thought, as you know, actually it's the same non-com putting together the slates for both orgs and chapters, right? So in that sense, it's formed by. So their actually discussion, which is not a proposal yet because they are just discussing it, just to be clear, was to have two separate non-coms. One that would do the slate for the chapters that would be formed by board people and chapter people, and one that would do the same for orgs, and it would be formed with org people and trustees. Okay. So that was one thing. And then, basically moving from there, at some point, it would be kind of, as you said, the chapter selecting their own members in a non-com, and the same for orgs. And my reaction to that, and I think I have talked to you as well, is that what we would like to see is that both advisory committees and communities in general are active enough and mature enough and responsible enough to be able to do that. And we've been discussing kind of, lack of engagement sometimes in terms of, the orgs. And in the past, a few years ago, we also said that could be a problem for chapters. So in that sense, I think the best thing we can do this year is that tomorrow the chairman or the chairperson of the NOMCOM is to do a call for candidates, that which I think we did. I mean, Olga will fill the details because he was running the process. But anyway, I mean, as you said, maybe it wasn't clear to make sure that the communication reaches everyone. So probably involving you would be a must. And then with basically the volunteers we get, the board will basically decide how to form that. And Olga wants to explain how it's actually done.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Thank you, Eduardo, and nice to see you in such a beautiful environment and envying you here. Nice breeze, by the way. Let me tell you that we always make a call to organizations and chapters to appoint members of the non-com. By the way, last year we had, when I chaired the non-com, not last year, the previous year, it was Beatriz Rodriguez, you know Beatriz from Uruguay. We had Mariliana Mendez from Costa Rica, the ones I know from the region, and I don't remember others, but that call is open. And I remember when Avri was chairing the chapter advisor committee, I contacted her in having this idea of the chapter advisor committee helping us in finding volunteers for the non-com. And she told me that after consulting with the chapter advisor committee, that was not in the charter and in the mandate of the chapter advisor committee. So that has been done when not when I was chairing the non-com, but the previous year when Alice was chairing the non-com. So that call is open, and let me tell you, it's not easy to find volunteers for working in the non-com because it's a lot of work. You have to devote time for interviews. You have to devote time to review all the information, CVs and background of the different candidates, and then you have to have calls to decide which are the best candidates. So I think the call is open, and I don't know if the non-com will be divided or not. This is something to be decided in the future, but there is always a call for volunteers. So I don't see where this increased transparency is points to. Maybe you can clarify that to me.
Thank you, Olga, for the information. Yes, the thing is that none of what you are saying is published anywhere, as far as we know. It might be in your mind, but it's not published anywhere. We don't know what criteria you're looking at on the people that you want to have in the non-com, because really you don't want everyone. I mean that's or if the chapters need to do a process to select people to send to the non-com for you to select from that list, that I don't know. It's all about having the process in place that people can look at. Yes, I know you made a call, but when people look back, there's nothing in the website that says, for non-com you do X, Y, Z. This is what we do, and so forth. It has to do with that. That's when I'm talking about transparency. I'm talking about that.
Okay, I think that's understood. So we will make sure that you get the open call when we send it, and to be clear, I mean, we are not asking you guys to screen the volunteers in any way, but we just want a list of volunteers. So in that sense, we will make sure that it goes to the right mailing list, that the information is clear, the process, and we can run it for you, and you can read it and say, hey, this is still not clear, and we can agree on a text that is explicit enough. Because I agree that this is important to get right, and if you think it's confusing, we need to fix that. Absolutely.
Okay, great. So if we can get the next one, please. Thank you, Olga.
To Hans-Peter. Yes, Eduardo. One second. I think Hans-Peter wants to say something, but I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
So Hans-Peter. Yes.
Yeah, I think we should include in this process also the election committee, because it's the same problem.
That's a very good point. So the election committee, it also has, thanks Hans-Peter, external members, and that's a very good point, actually.
And my experience from former years is that it needs really some hand wrestling to get a candidate either from the chapters AC or from the chapters or from the org members. So I think you are right. We need to clarify the process, and
yes, and what Hans-Peter and Olga said, that's exactly the reason why I wouldn't feel comfortable offloading this to the advisory committees, because I don't see the energy and the matureness yet to do that. But that's clearly the idea. I mean, I would love to do that because I think it would make a lot of sense. But anyway, for now, let's make sure that we get a good stream of candidates we can basically put in those committees. and then if basically we manage to improve things, that would be great. But first steps first. Improving communications, clarifying things, involving Eduardo and of course Jim and the other guys. Probably we need to do that for the PIR NOMCOM as well when we have that doesn't have external members yet, and for the elections committee. Okay, noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So if we can get to the next one, and I think this is the last slide. Basically, just want to give you some ideas of discussions that we started having in the advisory committee. We just had we look at the fellowship strategy update, and this is something that we felt in fact, the chapters were not included in the process of developing this strategy. I mean, like I mentioned before, there are thousands of members out there that could have helped. I mean, I'm talking about thousands, but many that could have helped in giving input into this strategy when it was being developed. I'm not saying this strategy is wrong or good, but it's something that feels as it took a top-down approach, and this I will reverse into the old ISO. It's a rhetorical question. Okay, it's not for you to answer, but this is something that is getting pushed to the chapters, and this is this is something that we haven't seen for a while. For example, this how good is to have chapters included in this. I always take the example of the latest MOU charter letter that we all signed. The first version of that one created a lot of havoc, and then ISOC requested comments from the chapters, and the MOU developed into something that was more in a consensus approach with the chapters, and it was so good, the final document, that everybody signed it except 2 or 3 chapters for whatever reasons they have. So, I'm just saying that when these things happen, please consider including the chapters so we don't feel excluded from this, and it doesn't feel like it's getting pushed. And there's a lot of questions about how this is going to be implemented. And again, if there is a group of people working on the implementation of this, please, ask the chapters who wants to volunteer and help with this, just to get their input into the process, and we will feel all included into this. So that's all. That's some of the discussion that we have had in the advisory committee. And then we had another discussion on the code of conduct, and the code of conduct that is already published in the website. It's again, we were not included in this when it was put together. The same reason as the fellowship strategy. And also we look at it, and there are things there like says include only relevant portions for union and message in replies, and I know it's under a heading of etiquette and things like that, but it's all under the code of conduct. This is not part of the code of conduct. Using profanity and things like that might be, it's more in tune with the code of conduct, but it's all these things are mingled in there, and it's just. If you look at it, you will see the things that we're talking about. It just doesn't make sense to us, things like that. And there are others in there. So that's I just wanted to give you the feeling of the discussion.
So to tackle this, I mean, I'm not familiar at all, but I understand this is like mailing list etiquette or something like that you would like it to be captured in a different way, not in the code of conduct, or did I understand correctly?
That's one of them. The other thing is that again, this is another top-down approach. We were not invited to participate in this.
I see.
I mean, there's part of it too. Maybe if we would have participated in this, it would have been a better code of conduct. It probably made sense. It would be divided in an etiquette and a code of conduct.
Right.
It's all mingled.
Yeah. I mean, well, and to talk about the other issue on the slide, the fellowship strategy, I mean, just to clarify the status, and I will have Andrew, I mean, clarify where we are as well. We haven't approved the strategy, as you know. We actually, you know, sent the previous board, as you know, I mean, today we changed to the new board. Actually, an action point, one of the action points that we transferred was to continue supporting this, but the board hasn't approved the strategy yet. I know that Sally and her team, they have been asking around, getting feedback, and I know that they will get further feedback. Sometimes it's difficult to ask for something completely unstructured, so I know that they wanted to structure somehow the discussions in order to get feedback, which would be, you know, more conducive to a successful outcome. But anyway, I will let, you know, Andrew clarify where we are and how basically that engagement is done. So Andrew, please.
Thanks. So first of all, thank you for all of this. I want to take these two topics separately because they're different kinds of problems. So in the case of the fellowship strategy, what we did do as a staff function was we concluded that the existing fellowships were not working, and I don't apologize for not doing a consultation about that. They weren't working. They were not achieving any measurable result of any kind. I didn't even know how to ask the question whether these were achieving any result, because they didn't have clear statements of what things they were supposed to achieve. So what we're trying to do with the current fellowship strategy is we did some work as staff to prepare a proposal about what we think would be useful in a fellowship strategy. And when we engaged the consultants to talk about this, they very quickly analyzed our existing fellowship programs and said, these aren't fellowships at all. They're travel stipends. That's what they are. You're paying people to get on airplanes. And so if what you want to do is have a strategy around fellowship, then what you need to do is structure something along those lines. And so that's what we've done. We brought that to the board to ask them about this. The follow-on work from this is in fact to engage some, to hire some staff in order to lead the follow-on pieces of this, which involve what the implementation would look like, what kinds of options. That is the period during which I would expect formal consultations to happen in order to make sure that what we're doing is in line with what the board has asked us to do in terms of an overarching focus, and then we go to the community to say, okay, so here are the ways that we think that we want to do this, and does this seem like a good idea, and should we implement it this way? But I think that as the staff, we're asked to deliver a sort of picture of what a proposal would be, and then we have to take that around and make sure that we have the support for it. So that's the reason that we're building this piece by piece. So I'm concerned that you imagine that we have a strategy and we're going ahead and implementing it, because in fact what we've got to do is develop the pieces necessary to make an implementation plan that is a serious and detailed one. And I think that is the point at which I would expect we would be consulting with the community. It's essentially impossible to develop the full strategy as a completely community based effort, because you really need to consult on some options. You can't really develop all of the options along with the entire community, or it will just never terminate. And so I think what we need to come with is a proposal for the kinds of goals that we think we're supposed to be achieving, and then say, well, this is the way we would like to achieve it, and does this work, and so on. So that's the approach that we're taking in there. And I want to be clear that I don't intend this to be a top-down approach, but it is intended to provide a sort of whole picture of what it is that we're going to do. So I don't know if we want to discuss that further, or
Eduardo, I guess it clarifies, but yeah, please.
I just want to clarify something. We are not, when I'm saying that the chapters were not included in this, I'm not looking at the way they say I can just put it out for comment so many days and blah, 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 blah. No, just make a call out there and see who is interested in part. And I mean, when there was a team put together to do this strategy, and you brought some people from the outside that might or might not know, may or may not know anything about the chapters and how they behave, and the history of ISOC as such. But you could have called for volunteers to participate in that team, and get there, 2-3 people to participate in that team as part of the strategy. Consider them as consultants, with the view they will bring the interest and the view from the chapter side. And it might be that the whole strategy will have ended the same way it is, but now it's too late. It's there. Now there will be an implementation, yes, and if we are asked to be part of implementation and comment on it, we will do such. And if there is a team put together to do the implementation, I suggest that you call for volunteers of the chapter, for 2 or 3 people, and include them in that team, because they will bring the view from the chapters, and the chapter will feel included in the process, good or bad.
So that is, I think, what we were intending. To be clear about the consultants, though, that we brought in, we didn't bring in consultants to design the to design the program. We brought in consultants in order to learn about what fellowships look like in organizations that have been successful with them. Because we believed, and I continue to believe, that our fellowships were not actually achieving the things that we were trying to do. We were not actually building, the sort of technical or policy expertise that we would like. And that was really, we were trying to understand that. So we hired experts to tell us, well, these are the people who've had this they had this goal, and here was how they managed to do it. And that was very helpful to us. And that's why we came up with this proposal, which, again, the board has not yet accepted or acted on or anything like that, precisely so that we can have this kind of conversation. But I take your point about involving the community in the implementation, and I think that that's what we intend to do. On the other topic,
I'm sorry, can I finish with this, just a few words?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Let me tell you, I agree with you that these programs were not effective. So I'm glad, you took it to move this in something more effective. I mean, that's very good. So I just want to clarify that. It's just that the chapters were not included, but that's fine. We can go to the next one.
So on the code of conduct thing, we did not. I mean, this is a code of conduct for the mailing lists that we operate, right? This is not a code of conduct for how you operate in the world. It's about how people operate on those mailing lists. And the reason that chapters were not included is because you don't join the mailing list of chapters, you join as individuals. And we're operating these mailing lists. This is the straightforward mailing list operation thing. This is the behavior that we're willing to tolerate. The reason we adopted this is because we have the responsibility to administer the mailing list, and we need to have some rules, that allow people to administer these things. What was happening before, in fact, was, of course, this kind of administration was already happening, and it wasn't written down anywhere. So all that we did was we wrote down how we were already operating the mailing lists, and we published it. That's literally what we've done here. If there are modifications to this, I would be very interested to hear that. I think that the pieces that you say are mixed together about different kinds of things are in fact all parts of what the responsibility of the mailing list manager is. But I think that it's a good idea to have a dialogue about that, and we can spin up a mailing list to discuss mailing list policies. I don't have any problem with doing that. But I think it was really, really important that we publish, what in fact staff were already doing, because this was the job that people asked us to do long before I got to the Internet Society. Well, not before I was a member, but long before I joined as a staff member. So I think that, if what you're suggesting is that we need a mechanism by which the community develops the formal codes to create standards of behavior on the mailing list, I don't see any problem with that. But I'm not sure that that's actually a chapter job, right? Because people don't join the mailing list as chapters; they join the mailing list as individuals. And so I think it probably needs to be. It shouldn't actually be a formal chapter role to comment on the administration of those mailing lists, unless it's the mailing list for that chapter. And I think the chapter actually should have absolute discretion over how its own mailing list is operated.
Thank you, Andrew. So, you know, I was under the we were under the impression this had to do with individual members. This is for email, and again, you know, code of conducts are there. So if you don't follow them, you are penalized. And I guess if we're talking about email systems, you get take off an email list. Now, I don't know how you measure how relevant portions of original message are good, how big or how relevant they are. Maybe my way of thinking is that everything is relevant. For other people, it might be one sentence. So how do you measure that? That's why I'm putting that example there. Anyhow, we will definitely, you know, we'll take it on giving you some ideas of the things that we see wrong and things that we can help you with. You putting something there that we think will be more tuned to the code of conduct where we see it. But you know, it will be only a recommendation. So that's all I wanted to say about this. There's nothing else.
Thank you, Eduardo. Is this the last slide, or?
This is the last slide, and again,
Okay.
I want to thank all of you for hearing me and inviting me to give this report. And I'm open anytime. If you want to contact me, please contact me, and we can chat about anything.
And also, I mean, last time we were talking that, you know, the way we handle kind of the advice and recommendations and everything. And I think, I mean, I want to thank you, Eduardo, for, you know, taking up with staff the you know, kind of issues, so that most of them, you know, actually can be resolved directly. And just to be clear on, so, you know, we don't drop the ball. You presented a set of issues. I understand you are discussing all with staff, so this is just a heads up for us, except two, which is the issue about the nominations committee and elections committee, which I myself took a note. So we take responsibility on that at the board level. So that's also your view, just to make sure we are on the same page.
Okay. Well, thank you. Like I said, thank you so much for hearing me today, and so that's it. That's all I have to say.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Eduardo. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Thank you to you all. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. So now we are a few minutes behind, 12 minutes behind, but I think it was good you know, discussions. And as I said, again, I mean, the timing management of issues when, you know, we have so many people remotely is difficult, especially because it's weekend, so we cannot ask them to join half an hour before, so we have buffer. So that's why, you know, we had to burn some minutes before, so that Eduardo and Jason could make the presentation. So now the following topics, or the following topic, is to get a presentation from Andrew on the organization membership update, and that's point number 12 on the agenda. As you can see, it's divided in open session and closed session. So Andrew will start in open session, and at some point we will close. Then right after that, it's the board lunch. So in that, I mean, this is for remote participants, so they know when to join back. And then we will have the session for the photos of the trustees. We always do that at the AGM. So the idea is to resume in open session at 1:30 local time, whatever it is in your time zone. I have no idea, but anyway, so that's kind of the structure for the next, you know, couple of hours of meeting time. But first, Andrew's open session part of the presentation. Okay, perfect. So Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Next slide, please. So you all remember that we proposed something, the staff proposed something in 2018 having to do with organization membership, and that organization membership was sort of simplified and so on. Some of this was due to concerns about the changing nature of organization membership due to the restructuring of the relationship between the Internet Society and the IETF. Some of this had to do with the follow-on effects of the integration of the Online Trust Alliance into the Internet Society and so on. So we had a bunch of things that that potentially affected that, and so there was this proposal. It was, I think, saying that it was very badly received is at least fair. Maybe that's understating things. So we were asked to revisit the issue, and so that's what we did. In January, we retained an association management consultant in order to do some assessment. We got a bunch of feedback, and we engaged with the organization members in a number of different ways. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And based on those recommendations, we've got a proposal here that we'd like to advance to you. I do apologize that this was presented first to the OMAC meeting yesterday before it came here. That has to do with the timing, but you know, the way these meetings were set up, this was the way to do it. And of course, you all wanted to, everybody needs to get it anyway. So if you were in the OMAC meeting, you're going to be bored. Next, please. So what we did, we had three sort of top line things here. Oh, and I should say, I want to credit the staff who did this, because I, of course, had nothing to do with this. This was led primarily by Joyce and her staff. Anita is here in the room, and I know that she spent a bunch of time on this. A number of the staff were involved in this, and it was a lot of work. And I know that people have worked hard on it, and it was a little bit painful work because it was very difficult to get people engaged. So that itself is something that we ought to attend to. So there are sort of three large things that we did here. One was this discovery and analysis piece. This was some analysis about the current membership, the lapses, the things that have fallen off, people who are maybe prospective members. We spent a bunch of time looking at our existing collateral. So we've got the various marketing communications efforts that we've already got, trying to understand the retention and the selling points. Then we did sort of environmental scans. So we're trying to understand the industry, who are the people who might be affected by this, who might be interested in it, and so on. And we looked at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, the sort of standard SWOT analysis that you do. Then we did a bunch of listening work. So there were interviews and focus groups with staff members, and in fact with some organization members as well. One of the things that was a little bit troubling there was that it was relatively easy to get staff interested in this and quite difficult to get organization members to participate in there. We did have some people who participated, and we really, really appreciate it. But it was instructive how difficult it was to get people engaged in this, because when you're having that kind of difficulty, it tells you something about the way that people view you. We did a bunch of individual interviews as well, because those original the virtual listening sessions had low enough participation that actually we just reached out to people and saw, well, could we bother you for this? And we did a survey as well. The survey itself, in fact, did not have very high response rate. So this was I think it was a difficult wake-up call to see that kind of responsiveness, because what it meant is that a lot of our organization members basically treat us as an obligation, and then we go away from them. And I think that that's something that we really need to do something about. This is an urgent problem for the organization. We understand it's an urgent problem, and so we're going to try to do something about it. Next slide, please. The recommendations from the assessment came back based on this quite small response, quite small sample size. So we're really looking at a small sample size plus a number of recommendations that are coming from the consultants based on their experience in doing this with other organizations and so on. One thing that I think we heard more than once was that our engagement on projects with the members, and I guess we just heard this from the chapter as well, from the chapter's AC as well, that we need to engage with them aligned with their interests. And in the case of organization members, this is partly because we maybe don't fully understand what their interests are. So, we could, of course, look for input on organization priorities from the membership. We've already done that, in fact, this year. We also need to provide much clearer updates on projects. So our communications outbound about how we're doing and the work that we're doing are not clear enough. We're going to talk a little bit about that later today. We want to make sure that the resources we provide are of high value to the organization. So one thing that we did here, and we've heard it informally as well more than once, is that it would be really valuable to organizations to have targeted information that is appropriate for the thing that they're trying to do. And so this is a place where I think we can really do this. We can really deliver something. Obviously, we need to strengthen our marketing materials. Our marketing materials are confusing. This is true on the website. Our communications to members are confusing. But the other thing about it is, like, if you try to join the Internet Society as an organization member and you don't speak English as your first language, or even if you do, you're going to have a hard time understanding what those things say. Like, what are the benefits to you and so on. It's really not very clear, and we need to do something about that. The final thing, and this may be a little bit controversial, so I want to highlight it for you, is that we need to do a much better job of tracking our organization members, but of course members more generally, in order to understand what isn't interesting to them. Because one of the things that, of course, the consultant said is, okay, well, what are they looking at? And our answer was, I don't know, because we don't do a very good job of sort of understanding that. Next slide, please. So the first thing we want to do is really engage with the members in order to understand what their interests are. As part of the 2020 planning, we've already done this on several times. So this seemed like such an uncontroversial thing to do that we didn't even wait to ask, was this okay? We just went and said, yeah, well, that seems like pretty obvious then. So we just went ahead and did it. One staff member on the engagement team is working closely with project teams to try to figure out, and this is what we're going to do next, to try to figure out, hey, this is a place where our member, some subset of our members might be interested in this project that you're going to undertake. Why don't we reach out to them and sort of try to get them involved? We're going to, this is coming up, we're going to share the sort of shortlist projects. I'm going to talk about this later today. We're going to share that short list of projects with our members and our partners in order to try to identify places where we can collaborate with them. I'll just, on this word partners, I want to state something else because I'm really excited about this. Only a nerd would get really excited about this. But we, one of the things that bothered me was we use the term partners everywhere. Like, we talk about it, we talk about partners, and it's everything from, like, the janitorial services in our building to people, like Facebook, who's given us $2 million. That's all like partners. And I said, that's kind of crazy. Like, could we have a definition of this? So we've actually been working on sets of terminology within the staff in order to slice this up and sort of talk clearly about, these are partners. This is what it means to be a partner with the Internet Society. And by the way, by getting that clarity, we can also have some pre-approved kinds of legal templates so that when we enter into a partnership with another organization, we have sort of standard terms that we just use. And if somebody falls outside of that, then it's a different kind of relationship because it requires a sort of special case. But what this would do is reduce the amount of time it takes us to get people engaged in this way, try to make things really, really plain. So that's a sort of outcome of this that is ongoing right now. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So we're working through the priorities, the sort of overall priorities and planning process for this year, and we're trying to engage with people in a consistent way from year to year. One of the things that I noticed, you all heard this, well, not every one of you, but most of you heard this when I gave my talk that convinced you to hire me, was that I felt like it was very hard to understand how things linked up. And that was partly because I think people weren't engaged with the development of the priorities by the organization from year to year. So the goal of this 2025 vision and the planning process for next year is to link these things across years, put things together in a sort of reasonable way so people can look forward and say, hey, this is a good idea, and I know that something's coming up. So we're going to repeat this every year. We're going to have this kind of engagement as we develop the action plan for the following year. What this, of course, means is that, the action plan sort of big reveal in November is not that big a reveal, because by that point, people have already been engaged with it. I regard that as a good thing. I don't think that, people should have to wait on tenterhooks for what we're going to do for the following year, when instead we could be engaged with them and bringing them along. We're also trying to track these things in the association management system, the Member Nova, in order to try to figure out, hey, we had this conversation, we had this conversation, we had this conversation. There's a trend emerging here, and that would allow us to sort of figure out what's going on across the organization. We have to do that partly because we have staff all over the place, and these staff, they don't meet up all the time by the water cooler or something like that. So we need to have a system that we can put these things together so that people can say, actually, we're finding this is a trend that's cutting across the, our engagement all over the world. We have regional bureaus, we have membership and various community engagement people who are out in the field. It seems very, very foolish not to take advantage of all of that and to try to bring it together so that we've got a common understanding of what it is that is driving the people who are interested in the Internet Society. Next, please. We want to make sure that the resources and the membership benefits are clear. And the reason we want to do that is because we want people to be engaged with us so that they are participating in driving our priorities and so on. We're going to try to put this in plainer English. Maybe some of you have noticed that I don't like complicated things when you could state things simply. And I think some of the staff are getting tired of me going on about that, but nevertheless, that is one of the real high priorities for me. It's not only in English, of course, we need to do this in the other languages that we support throughout the Internet Society. One of the things we discovered as part of this scan is that there's a number of materials that we have that are more than a year out of date when they're translated. That seems like a bad idea. If you're gonna support translation, you have to keep the translations up to date. That's one of the critical things you got to do. Part of the reason we haven't done that is, it goes back to the tracking that we haven't been doing in the past.
So does having things stated plainer help that process? Like if you had this convoluted explanation of what it is to go translate it, like you have to go, is it harder?
Yes,
okay.
Right. So what happens is, if you need the services of a legal translation service every time you need to update something, then it takes months and months and months. And it turns out to be really spendy, and so then people don't want to do it, and then there's a lot of institutional resistance actually to updating these benefits as well, because it's a big expensive deal. Well, this should be fast, cheap, and easy to do, and it should be fast, cheap, and easy to do in all of the languages where we're engaged with people. Next, please. There's a lot of words on this slide, but fundamentally what we're trying to talk about here is how we communicate to people. And part of this is exactly what we were just saying about marketing materials and so on, and making sure that things are up to date in all of the various languages that we're supporting. But also we need to have some sort of mechanism by which we engage with people. And right now, I think even the staff of the Internet Society, when they're talking to people, don't have a clear message that they're carrying forward. One of the things that was really instructive for me when I worked at Dyn before we were acquired by Oracle is that everybody in the whole organization knew what we were about at any given time. Everybody knew it. Half the people had it in their email signature. I, of course, being a geek, didn't do those kinds of things, but lots of people had them in their email signature. But it didn't matter because everybody knew. And every time somebody asked you, well, what are you guys doing? You could just answer that. And I don't think that that's true right now of the Internet Society staff, because we haven't been clear about it. It's not because they don't know. It's because we haven't said it plainly and succinctly. If you don't say things plainly and succinctly, then your own staff can't remember it. And also, of course, when you give this message to some prospective member, they can't remember it either. So we need to get much better at that. Next, please. So we've got this value proposition, and I'm going to put it up next. Our goals for this, from our point of view, my point of view from the professional staff of the Internet Society, what do we want? What do we want as goals for membership? We want, first of all, to make sure that they're satisfied and that they stick around. So we want people to be satisfied and that they stick around because they give us money, and we need the money in order to keep the programs going. The second thing that is really, really super important for us is that we want the members to be engaged. And I'm not even sure that these are in rank order. Like if I had to pick 1 and 2 here, I'm not sure which order I would put them in. These two things are co-supporting goals. And the reason they're co-supportive of one another is because you're going to have greater satisfaction and retention if you've got people who are engaged, and conversely, right? If people are just disengaged, they're going to be dissatisfied. And as soon as somebody else comes along and says, hey, we're doing a budget cut, like, why should I be paying this thing? The answer is going to be, I don't know. And so it's going to go away. So we need to retain those things by the engagement, and the engagement reinforces the first goal. These are, like, if we did nothing else, those are the things we need to do. We believe that these things are achieved through input in the direction of the Internet Society, building the community, being legitimate, and that therefore we get new members, and we get more revenue, and we get more visibility, and this becomes a virtuous circle that carries us forward. And what this really comes down to, right, is a value proposition for membership. That's what it comes down to. Next, please. The members have certain expectations of us, and it was pretty clear that the top three in bold there were the things that members expected from us. They really, really expect us to talk about policy, to engage with them on policy, and to consult with them. They really, really expect us to tell them what it is that we're doing, and expect us to tell them what we're doing in plain communications that they can understand, and people want to collaborate with us. We ought to be able to collaborate with our organization members in particular. This is a thing that we can do. We do it sometimes reasonably well. We've got a great partnership, for instance, with Facebook in particular. I'll call out because I was just out there, but we've got a number of members that we're doing that with. But I think that this is a model that we need to repeat. And the rest of these things are important priorities, but they were somewhat less important. And some of these are, of course, related to the first three. So it could be the case that actually people, were talking about something in a more generic level and a more specific level. One thing that I think probably is valuable and that we're not really offering well enough is access to our staff. We've got professional staff who really know a lot of things about a lot of different things, and people ought to be able to get access to that. So that's something that I'm hoping that we're going to improve upon. Next, please. So we wrote down a value proposition. This is still, in my opinion, a little long, but I think that we're getting there. This is a straightforward value proposition we can put up on the website and people can understand it. And here are the things that you get and things that you get to do, and the ways that we engage with you as a member. And in particular, you notice that it's talking about shaping the public policy analysis and the recommendations. This is a participatory goal, right? The value proposition here is that we're doing things together, and that's a really, really critical part of what we're trying to do. What that means is that we use the professional staff to make sure we've got information and valuable things that the organizations can access, but also that they participate in these things so that we build the internet together, because we're not going to build the internet alone. That's just not one of the things that you can do. Next, please. One of the biggest controversies in the proposal before was the elimination of the tiered levels, and it was very, very clear that that needs to be maintained. And I think that the assessment revealed that as well. We're going to do that. But what the assessment did was, so these are professional association people, right? They don't know anything about the internet. And they looked at our things and they're like, you've got 6 levels here, and I can't tell the difference between 1 through 5. So we need to separate these things. We need to differentiate what the different levels are. That was really, really useful feedback. It was a little painful to hear, but it was really useful feedback that allowed us to say, okay, we're going to distinguish these things well, and we're going to develop a ladder. We did conclude at the end of this that 6 different levels was too many, given what we were offering. So we're going to combine the bottom layer and put that together at $3,500 US. It's a middle ground between the two things. Next, please. So here is the eye chart that shows you what all of these things are. This is in Board Effect, so you can have a look at it. This will, as we roll this out, assuming that you approve it and so on, we will we'll put this on the website, and this will be the basis for our engagement. But you can see that at the top of this, well, maybe you can't see because it's so tiny, but there are a number of things that are being retained. In particular, though, there's also some direct engagement that we're doing. So if somebody is going to give us $100,000 a year, we think that we should pay a lot of attention to them. And so we should spend some time. We've got designated Internet Society account manager to tailor your relationship with us to make sure that you're getting the kind of attention that you want, because we think that that's somebody who's really engaged with us and who probably wants to develop wider participation and so on. These are definitely organizations with whom we think we can develop not just a membership relationship, but an additional partnership to achieve common goals together and so on. And that is true at some of the other layers as well. People who are more engaged maybe have less money to spend on this, but have more money to spend on common activities. Nevertheless, very often, once you get people who have that kind of partnership capability, there is the additional money to unlock, and we need to do that. We need to do that in order to deliver on the revenue diversification thing that you've asked me about several times already. So that's a piece piece of what we're doing. Another thing that we really want to develop, I'm concentrating mostly on the things that we're changing. But another thing that we really want to develop is this tailored ISOC updates based on your areas of interest. So many of you will be members, for instance, of the ACM, and when you join up, you have these check boxes that you go into the thing, and then you get these regular updates that are about those things, and you don't get all of the other stuff that you don't care about. Well, we don't do that right now. You get a newsletter, and it's about all of the stuff that the Internet Society is interested in. And what this means, of course, is that it's very easy to disengage with that because it's not tailored for your kind of stuff. And in the present age where everybody is micro-targeted all the time by all their advertisers, we can't afford to be sending out generic things like this. We need to be engaging with people, sometimes on things that they don't know that they might be interested in, so we need to figure that out, but also sometimes on things where people are really interested in that, so we can present, for instance, policy briefs that are useful to you. So imagine that you're going into some sort of meeting with somebody, and you want to know about these things. Well, like, why can't you go into our portal and sort of check off, these are the things that I know that these people are going to want to talk about. I want information about that. What are the current ISOC positions on these things? We can deliver that to you quickly. So that's the sort of thing that I think we need to develop, and we need to provide that kind of input. But this is a lot of work. I don't want you to imagine that this is a trivial amount of work, because what this means is we need to catalog all of the stuff that we have and all of the positions we have and have a clear understanding of what those are, so that we can extract the value that is going to be there for you when you indicate it to us. Not trivial work, high value. In the lower tiers here, you can see we continue to work on making sure that there's still a lot of engagement, peer-to-peer events, and access to our materials and so on. Those peer-to-peer events are really, really important because we want to continue to engage with everybody. Again, the internet is a network of networks, and because it's a network of networks, everybody has to be engaged in order to build it. So we need to make sure that that kind of engagement continues. I'm not going to go through every level of this. You can read it, and if you have particular questions, obviously ask me. Next, please. So the next steps, we presented this to the OMAC. We got pretty good feedback in the room, but we'll see whether we continue to get that feedback. You heard from Jim earlier, and he said that he continued to think that this was pretty strong. We obviously need to get a communications plan for this to socialize this with all of the members in order to put this across, and then we'll do an implementation plan. Some of this is going to involve updates to Member Nova. So some of the calendar is going to depend on the vendor and so on. So we've got a bunch of things that are dependencies there. And then obviously we've got to update all the materials, but that's just part of the sort of standard implementation. I think that's the last slide in this part of this. Yes. So I don't know if there are any questions, or if you want to go on to the next session.
Yeah. Any questions before we yes.
In one sentence or less, how different is the eye chart from what people have been getting in the past?
Well, in particular, there's a lot more differentiation. So today, if you join at a very low level or a much higher level, it's very hard to tell what the difference is. Basically, organization members can differentiate their tiers based on how many votes they get. And apart from that, it's very hard to tell the difference. And so our intention is to increase the benefits, the sort of transactional benefits to people who are supporting us at a higher level in order to incentivize people to move there. But it's also because the more people are engaged with us, the more likely we think that those are people that we can work together on a broader front.
The other thing is, how does the 25% directing money work? Since presumably we can't let them tell us what to do.
So part of the idea here is that they can tell us a little bit what to do, and that is they can say, well, this is actually a really high priority for us. If all of the people who were giving us $100,000 said, no, we think that project ABC is the one that we want to devote our 25% to, and I had 100,000 members, that would be a real signal, and it would tell me, okay, well, I'm going to do that, and we're going to put the resources into it. And I think that is part of the deal. In the past, this has been difficult to use, partly because we haven't sort of laid out clearly what our policy or what our plans are for the following year far enough in advance for people to do this kind of thing, right? I mean, people are not engaged at the time when the project plans come out. And so what we need to do is make that a live option for people if they want to exercise it. It's also true that historically people used this very heavily to support the IETF, and that was the primary way in which it was used, and that's much less happening now. What we do discover is that some people have used this facility, and what they've really done is what they've been signaling is, we don't want you to spend it on that thing. That thing is stop that. Any of these things are fine. And you get that kind of message. It's like, right, got it. Okay, you just think that project is dumb. So that's that's part of the feedback that we take.
Pepper.
Yeah. So John, part of it is it's not thinking about it. It's not the 25% or the members would be telling ISOC what to do. It would be supporting programs that ISOC staff has already developed that are in flight, and then you can say these are the projects that I'm really interested in supporting. So I think we do have to be very careful that that doesn't become a different way to tell staff, Andrew and staff, what to do, because we're not, ISOC is not a consultancy for hire type of organ. That actually would fundamentally violate our core work, right? So I think it's a really great point. We have to be very careful, but I think it's about supporting programs that are in flight that Andrew and the staff have developed.
I gather some money is fungible. It's basically symbolic, but it's a symbol we take fairly seriously.
Well, I mean, it is a defined member benefit, and it's true that if we had a very large number of members and they at that level and they all directed this, it would affect what we could do elsewhere, right? Because it would effectively mean that we're only working with the 75% of the rest of the budget, that was fungible in this way. Now, right now, our budget is dominated by PIR money, and so in this particular case, it's not that much of an effect. But if we are successful at this, and we are actually able to grow the membership, the organization membership in this direction to a significant amount, it could actually affect the budgetary balance, right? So we actually need to pay attention to this.
Yeah, the queue is Richard, myself, and Jim.
So Andrew, I noted in here that there's a bunch of actions, things that ISOC is to do as part of fulfilling this value prop and fulfilling our role in this, from creating these tailored things, providing points of contact, range of communities. How much of that is kind of stuff we're doing already, but maybe differently organized or revectored, and how much of it is going to be kind of new stuff we need to create?
So I think one of the critical things to understand, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when I show you what we're going to, where we are in our planning for next year. But one of the things that we have sometimes done is we've treated the how we do things and the stuff that we do as distinct problems. So we treat, for instance, in this particular case, how we deliver value to our members as a separate problem from what are the projects that we're doing and how are we going to implement them. And instead, what we've been emphasizing, and this was true in the action plan from last year, but I think we're getting better at it as we go along, is that what we're trying to do is structure our activities around the projects that we're doing so that we provide that kind of engagement. And that was part of the reason that I was a little bit devastated, really, to hear this suggestion from the chapter AC about top down, because in fact, I feel like we're pressing entirely in the opposite direction. And so that's really what the goal is here, to integrate this sort of effort around the activities that we undertake, that way providing the positive feedback loop that then engages more and more of the membership.
Thanks. Regarding the how to target like funds to a project, the problem, I guess, and that's part of the discussion, but let's have it explicitly because it's a bit in the details, but I heard that when we were able to do that for the ITF, is like, let's say that we have a budget of 3 million and 1 million goes to project A. If I put 100,000 euros on project A, you have two ways to do that. That project A gets 1.1 million instead, or project A gets 1 million anyway, but you are using only 900 out of the existing budget. So effectively, you are funding everything else while you are targeting project A. So my view, at least, would be that we would do something type of Kickstarter type of thing, right? Like, hey, this is the budget we have allocated to Project A. If we had more money, we could do this, because that's the only way that we are actually helping that. Because otherwise, basically, it's just money in a budget, and then you allocate it as you wish. Then it's kind of weird. So I understand this is in the details, but it's just to make sure that nobody can claim, hey, I'm allocating money for the ITF, but what I'm doing really is helping, the chapters, because, you're going to give this to the ITF anyway, because this is what you do. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
I do. And to be perfectly honest with you, historically, that's exactly how it's worked. The critical thing here is sort of twofold. One, part of the reason it worked that way is because we have concentrated almost all of our effort around money that comes from PIR, and the stuff that comes from our membership and other sources of revenue. They're treated as the sort of secondary consideration, because so much of the money comes from PIR. So this has two problems, right? One is the sort of risk to the organization that many of you have already pointed out to me several times about having this sort of overly dominated revenue stream. But the other thing about it is that it creates perverse incentives. It creates incentives for the organization to concentrate only on that and not pay enough attention to what our membership is saying to us. So to some extent, yes, I mean, our plan is to try to, earmark a little bit the monies and sort of set them aside so that it steers more money towards projects that people really want to support. And I think that is one of the things we're trying to do. But I mean, with the current overwhelming dominance of the money from one revenue stream, it's going to be effectively impossible to affect much direction through this mechanism right now. My hope, however, is that over time, actually, we can grow the organization membership. Look, I mean, we work in an industry that has people who make a lot of money. And some of those profits are not only extraordinary, but they're extraordinary in lots of different ways. And we're a 501c3, so we can write receipts for these things. We ought to be able to engage. With these kinds of organization members and partners in order to vastly increase the money that is available to us if we provide the kinds of projects that look really interesting to people. And we ought to set our sights there. If we're successful at this, I would like to be able to say, in 5 years' time, or maybe a little longer than that, that actually the bulk of our money comes from community tests, right? That we're clearly within the 1/3 thing, and that it comes from the membership and it comes from people who are partners with us and so on, because they're interested in what we're doing. And we have this stable core that comes from PIR. That would really be a transformation of the organization, because it would put us on a foundation that allowed us, yes, quite a lot of flexibility. We can take a lot of risks because we have this stable funding that comes from this activity that PIR generously provides for. But at the same time, we have a lot of support in the community, both through the evidence of people participating in the things that we're doing, and through the evidence of people giving us money. So that's the real hope for that, is that in the future it's a much more effective signal.
Yeah, and I agree it will be more relevant as the budget is more relevant. Yeah, that's obvious. So I have Jim and then Walid.
Yes, Jim Galvin from Affiliates, for the record, and thank you, Gonzalo, for giving me the opportunity to just speak. I want to make a comment after listening to a lot of this discussion from an org member point of view. I think that the one thing to keep in mind, which has really been important to me in particular, important to Affiliates in particular, and I can tell you that informally, also important to other org members, just anecdotally, a half a dozen people who we talk to, this is a defined benefit. There are things here which are interrelated, which kind of matter. I mean, as Andrew said, one of the things that's going on is as you build a process and a structure that makes it much more clear what's going on at ISOC, then it's much easier during the membership process to allocate money to something that's interesting and be part of it. I fully expect, and at least I recognize as a member, that I'm not really going to influence directly through my membership dues anything that ISOC does, because as Andrew says, there's just the dominance is elsewhere. But what's important is I can feel engaged. I can feel a part of things. And I have an opportunity through my relationship with ISOC throughout the year to understand what's going on. And then I can feel like I'm contributing to something directly. Even as a small member versus a small member, even a large one, if I can give a little bit of money to something, then I know what I'm contributing to, and I get some direct value out of that, and that's a good thing. And I just wanted to call out the benefit side of this from an org member point of view. This has been an issue for years because it's often been difficult to see what ISOC is doing, and so building up that understanding and knowing what that is and the ability to do that is pretty significant. It's a real distinguishing characteristic from, as Andrew highlighted at one point, voting being the only benefit that you could count on and depend your weighted voting. Now there's other things available to you, and that's important. Thanks.
And to be clear, I mean, I gave you the floor because I thought you were going to talk as the OMAC chair, because I mean, we are not giving this opportunity to other org members, but I mean, that's okay. Thanks for the feedback. But just to clarify that usually in this type of session, we have just invited guests and you have been invited in that capacity, just to clarify. Walid.
Since Jim mentioned voting, I may want to reflect on the fact that we've been struggling to raise the number of those who would like to be engaged in the voting process. I remember Anita and I were struggling to get them to respond and to interact. So I wonder if you've had any interaction with this. Do they see this as valuable? Do they understand the essence of being able to have someone, their votes represented through the process?
It was very clear in the feedback that we got that that was the value that many of the organization members believed they were getting. So it's true that our response rate was awful. I mean, the response rate for one of the things that we did was like 8%. I mean, and this is a tiny number of things. So the total, I think that the total sample was like 24 or something, right? So doing any kind of statistical analysis on this is a kind of cruel joke. But what really came across is that this is something that people really value. Now, that might be that there are other members that it's difficult to get that out of them. And my hypothesis, and of course we'll find out whether this is true just by implementing it, is that part of that disengagement comes from not really caring what the Internet Society is doing, and that's because we're not offering a big value proposition. So I want to make us relevant enough that people sit up and notice when they have a chance to influence it that way.
Thank you. Hiroshi.
I think this idea is pretty good, though we have to carefully making a system or evaluation what we are going to do. Especially, we also work in similar thing. Then the big donator want to have the big voice and try to control. So in that case, we always trying to making multiple players working together in order to work with us. Not we are not never working for them. So how to make such a leadership or checking process is a quite important thing. So that's implementation issue. That's we have to carefully do that. So that kind of thing we want to work with them, not work for them. Then we making progress to making a future good infrastructure. Then I think that's a good direction to do.
Thank you. Anything else? Yeah, Sean.
I guess I can't let this pass. I think you're saying the right things. I'm really, I've always been very concerned that we have a weighted revenue stream so highly to one side that we have to figure out how to explore other opportunities. And I think this is something that we have to do and something that we should support fully as a board, because at the end of the day, it's what we're trying to do is support the whole organization, and so that it can, stand on its own legs if PIR ever went away, right? So to continue on, because if the PIR money stopped for whatever crazy reason, the internet's still going to keep going on. And if we think that we want to be going on longer after, our pennies from heaven, good stewards are like doing their thing, we have to do something like this. Because the other idea that like some other grand money-making scheme is going to show up, yeah, okay, sure. If we'd have thought of that, we'd have done
it. And I really want to again emphasize that I believe that the community engagement and partnership development staff are really focused on that. That's been my experience over and over again. They keep talking about it. It's one of the things that, that they really pay attention to. It's wonderful when we're having, any kind of staff meeting and somebody says, oh, and this is an opportunity actually to engage people on these things and to find people who are, interested in developing this project further so that we can build a partnership, we can build a project out, and we can attract new organization members. So I think that actually there's a chunk of the staff who are really focused on that. And what we need to do in the upcoming years is to ensure that sort of trickles out through the rest of the staff so that it's something that everybody is just doing all the time. It's something that I believe that we have the capacity to do that, and we historically maybe didn't have the culture around that, and that's a little bit of a shift that we're undergoing right now.
Anything else? Yeah, and that's one of the focus areas we discussed this morning and yesterday. So yeah, I can agree. It's really important. Okay, thank you. So we're gonna close the open session now. Thanks all for joining. And as I said before, we will arrive, resume in open session around 13:30. We may be a bit late because we have the appointment with the photographer and everything. So if that's so, we apologize in advance, but we will do our best to be in time. So thank you. So now we're gonna open again in open to observer session, and we're gonna have 1 hour roughly, and we are in agenda point 13, which is the report from Andrew, basically. So Andrew, the floor is yours.
So what we're going to talk about today is an update on the current year's action plan, the things that we've measured. You'll remember that last year we emphasized somewhat the deliverables in the action plan, what those things look like and how we were going to measure things and so on. And then we'll talk a little bit about the 2025 strategy or the sort of vision, and we'll talk about planning for next year and so on. And then after that, we'll complete the discussion about that in closed session. So the things that haven't been announced yet, I can talk a little bit about some of those things. Renelia would have joined us for this, but I told her to go to bed. She's in Malaysia, and I don't see any reason why people have to stay up in the middle of the night. So I hope that's okay with you. She wasn't actually keen on doing that. She thought that she should come, but I thought that it would be important that people actually get some sleep. More generally, I want to say that the Internet Society staff have been working like crazy to deliver on this. So one of the things that I discovered was some weaknesses in our planning processes, historical weaknesses in our planning processes. And I already committed us to a bunch of measurement work that we were going to do this year, which was not really sort of standard practice traditionally. And what this means is that I'm asking the staff to do a whole bunch of additional measurement work that is outside of the traditional workload, plus the planning for next year, and we're jamming it all into this year. So I really want to go out of my way to emphasize how hard people are working on these things. And there are going to be some things here where you say, well, this seems to be a gap and so on. And the answer is yes. There are still a number of deficiencies in the way that we're measuring these things and so on, but we are getting better at it. And I really, really appreciate how hard the staff have been working on this because they're killing themselves to do it. So thank you to all of them. Next, please. So you'll remember that we had a bunch of focus areas that we talked about last year in the action plan, and they turn into particular projects. So here we have, we have this area of connecting the world, and that cashes out in terms of the community network effort and the IXPs and the interconnections, including the Facebook IXP grant, for which we are very grateful. Similarly, on the improving technical security focus, we have a banners campaign. We have building trust. It means that the OTA work is continuing. And we distinguished in what we talked about last year, we distinguished between the focus areas that we were working on, which were areas that the things that we were going to do, and then the approaches that we were trying to do, the way that we did stuff, the working in the community and so on. And this is found in that bottom table, and it engages with particular projects. We're going to talk a little bit more about the projects later. So this is what we're doing, and this is what we're trying to measure this year. Next, please. Go ahead. So the first of these is this community networks campaign, and we've got some measures about this. Next, please. So you can see this is a slide. I keep trying to get people to write things compactly, but maybe this has been a little bit too effective. I didn't know how big the screen was going to be, so I apologize that this is a little bit small. But you can see that there's a number of key accomplishments there. You all have this in the board deck as well, so you can have a look at it. Some really important things are happening there. In particular, you remember that we talked about getting governments. One of the key things to do here is to get governments to say, yes, community networks are the right strategy, because if you can get them to start doing it, then what happens is they find this a useful strategy and they continue. We've really had quite a bit of success here. We've got the community network workshop at the WSIS Forum. We've had Canada and Georgia and Papua New Guinea, and almost we're like on the cusp with Argentina. Didn't quite get there. So we've got them using public funds for community networks. Lesotho decided to change their universal service program rules in order to include community networks. This is a real opportunity to get those universal service program things. This is right all over the place, and people have these big piles of money that they keep collecting and they never know what to do with it. And we keep saying to them, hey, look, you could do this. And people are starting to do it. So what we're seeing is that we're having this kind of success. We even managed to get ITUD to join up with us. So so we're in a partnership with them, and I think that we've got we can really claim that as a positive result. We've got some upcoming milestones that are listed there. In particular, we're working on those 5 regional summits. So originally, the original plan was we're going to have this global summit. And then people started looking at how they were actually going to implement that, and they concluded, well, that's stupid. We can't do it. And I said, well, rather than pretend we're going to do it, why don't we readjust? And so we adjusted that. I talked to you about that last time, and many of you were very happy that we admitted that we weren't going to be able to do something, so we changed our minds. So this is a milestone that's coming up. We're continuing our training and so on. This project is basically on budget. Some of these projects, I should point out, they look like they're not on budget because you see like the budget is like 802,000 and the actuals are really only 140, and you're saying, how can this be on budget since we're halfway through the year? Well, it's because a lot of the planning was for things that were going to be spent late in the year. So you can see actually that there's some committed stuff that is still not actual there, but there's a whole bunch of expenses that are coming late in the year. We do have some risks on this project. In particular, we had a flagship that we were aiming for Zimbabwe. You may have heard that there have been some events in Zimbabwe, so we're not proceeding with that at the moment. There are some scheduling problems late in the year because there's a whole lot of stuff that's all happening late in the year. And we also, as you know, we ran into some trouble with our online training platform. And some of the online training depended on it, so we've had to adjust there. So there could be some risk. There could be some risk there. And of course, the event, we're grateful and we're happy to be in partnership with the ITUD on this. But of course, ITU is also leading that project, and when somebody else is leading a project, it's very hard to set the milestones for them. So that's a risk in this project. Next, please. Here are some things. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but you've got these in your deck. But as you can see, the targets and the status of these are in pretty good shape. The one that looks a little low is this 500 people trained, and as I just mentioned, that's a potential issue. There is another issue that is come along here. We've been working. We talked a little bit earlier today about some of the ideas we've had about fundraising and membership engagement and so on. And more generally, had a little bit of trouble getting all of the fundraising going as well as we would like. So the fundraising strategy for this is not really, it's not well along. I'm a little bit nervous about that. We think it's going to happen still, but there's been a little bit of difficulty there. Next, please. So this is about the IXPs and interconnections, excluding the Facebook case. Next, please. Again, we've got a number of accomplishments here. We've had quite a lot of luck. One thing that's really notable here, if you look the second bullet in the top left quadrant, we've had IXP workshops held in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. if you had told me 2 years ago that the Internet Society was collaborating in Saudi Arabia, I wouldn't have believed you. We have managed to work into that region. We've had some real successes there, and it's happening. So we're finding even governments in the places that have been historically most resistant to this are now interested in this topic. And I think that that's really positive, because what this means is that they're understanding that the internet is for them too. They're embracing this, and they're figuring out that this is the way to build a network that is more more responsive to the local needs. So I'm really excited about that. We've got a bunch of milestones, obviously, that are coming up. I think that these are all going to be fine. I'm going to one of these meetings. We've got all kinds of staff appearing at the various meetings, but we're having pretty good luck. And I expect that all of these milestones are going to be achieved. This project is also on budget. There are a lot of remaining funds in it, but once again, a number of these were committed for late in the year, so we expected that. There is a problem here that sometimes equipment is held up in customs. We run into that all the time, so that's just like sort of ordinary kind of risk, but it's a risk that is very, very unpredictable, and so we always try to list it. Next, please. As you can see here, we've got a number of KPIs, and I really have to call this out as something that this is a difficult thing to do for people to give these KPIs for a community effort, because it's dependent on other people, and yet the staff have really dug in and figured out how to measure things that have an effect in the world, that really make a difference in the world. So, for instance, we're training all of these people. Well, we believe that training large number of network operators is effective in the world. Not all of them will stay in network operations, but we think a lot of them will, and we think that if we make them better at it, that's more effective. We are having effectiveness with in-person training activities, and so we're continuing with that. We really are having quite a lot of success in this area, and in fact, the peering community strengthening is already complete for the year. I expect, in fact, that the numbers will go up a little bit higher, but we've already got that indicator. Next, please. So in parallel with that, of course, we also have the effort that we're in partnership with Facebook, and that's this effort here. We've had quite a bit of success here. I think that this is moving along. We had some really quite effective the Peering Roadshow in Burkina Faso. That was effective. I think we're seeing a number of these efforts. You can see there that there was a best practices workshop that was held in Lesotho, and I think that in general, what we're finding is this is quite effective. That this project is really taking off. There's a video that was done during the Burundi workshop. It's not public yet, so we're not going to show it yet, but we are going to show it to you in the closed session. Pepper generously agreed to allow us to do that. This was shot with Facebook funds, and it's really there, so I didn't want to just go ahead and play it in public yet. It's a rough cut, so but I thought it would be okay to preview it, and so did Pepper. So we're going to show it to you in the closed session. Those who are not going to see it in the closed session, you'll have to wait for it to show up on Facebook, but it's coming, and it's coming soon. We've got a bunch of milestones coming up. As you can see, we're going to hold a Peering Roadshow in Guinea and Mauritius. The budget is under budget. We're actually a little bit underspent here. Part of the reason for this actually has to do with a little bit of internal difficulty. We have some difficulty at the Internet Society with some of the reporting and so on that we've got to get better at. And we also have some difficulty with moving things through as quickly as we might like. We've also had some issues. There've been a couple of countries where people weren't really ready for the workshop, and that turns into a bit of risk for us. We also are trying. So a big part of what we're doing with some of this effort is not just exchanges, but also the cash fill piece, right? So a big part of this is you get machines that are available in an IXP, and you want to make sure that you can fill the caches and keep them useful. And so you've actually got to dedicate some effort to that. And one of the problems that that we are sometimes seeing is that not all of the IXPs are really ready to deploy this at the volume that they need to. And so then we run into the problem that they simply can't do it. And so we're ready to spend the money on them. We're ready to help them out, but they're not in a position to do it. And so that's a real risk in this project. Next, please. As you can see, a number of these KPIs are in good shape. We're 40% complete in the criteria at the bottom there. We've got a number of technical workshops that we've held. So we've sort of combined the best practices workshops and the technical training events because it wasn't always clear which thing was which. So we just decided we're going to treat them as one big pool. I think we're moving along with the deployment, but consistent with the underspend on the budget. We're a little bit behind on the second of these. Next, please. So in the area of improving technical security, we have this Manners campaign. Next, please. You all know Manners is really an effort to make sure that routing leaks don't happen. That's really what it comes down to. We've had a bunch of accomplishments. The milestone that I really want to emphasize here is the upcoming observatory public launch. So the observatory is in beta right now. Critical thing about this project is basically if you can't look at it, then you can't tell whether routing security is getting any better. And so the observatory is an absolutely critical piece of this, and that's the thing that's coming up. And my opinion is that, and this is really not speaking for myself, is that this observatory is the make or break a piece of this. That if we have this, I believe that it will cause this project to be much more successful. We do have some more milestones and so on, but workshops and so on. They're all interesting, and it's great to convince people that routing leaks are a bad idea, but it's much more important to be able to show those things. That to me is the really critical piece. We do have some risk to this project. Oh, and I should say this project is a little underspent, and this is just good news because it turns out this is turning out to be less expensive than we expected. We've got some risks and issues here. One thing that is a problem is that BGP Stream, which is a product now controlled by Cisco, they've end-of-lifed it, and so we're trying to replace that data feed. And if we don't have the data, obviously the observatory ain't going to work. So this is actually a critical risk for us. We think we've got a replacement for it. We think we've got an alternative, but this is a real risk for us. Some of the dates slipped originally on the observatory, and this was part of the reason, but it wasn't the only reason. There was a coding partner involved as well who missed some of their dates. We're late, therefore, on the public launch, and so we haven't really started measuring, because there's not really a lot to measure since you can't visit the site and you can't really see whether people are visiting it. So we've got that, and we haven't really started talking about the governance structure. One of the goals was to get the governance structure discussion going in the community so that the Manners project could turn into a community-led thing, and that governance discussion has not gotten going at all. This was partly due to difficulty getting a staff member on board. That's related a little bit to some of the payroll things that we're going to discuss in the closed session because of our global footprint. So some of this involves sort of staffing challenges. Next, please. So as you can see, some of these things are in pretty good shape, and some of them are a little bit behind. Obviously, for instance, we're working on the 20 new partners, and we're in the first half of the year we only got 6. But again, my view is that without the observatory, it's very hard to show people the value of this thing. With the observatory, it becomes pretty evident why this thing would be valuable to you. So I expect that to start to move. Similarly, the observatory is late. The 15 July thing was for phase 2, and what we're launching really is only phase 1, so that we are a little bit behind on this. And the training is bursty. So right now we've got a low number, but I suspect actually that 2,000 is going to be possible. But again, the governance model is way behind, and that's a little bit worrisome for launching this into the community. Next, please. So the building trust effort, we we've been measuring that in the context of the Online Trust Alliance, and so we're working on this. We have had a number of releases this year that have been successful. The activity 4 is finished. We released the online trust audit, and we continue to get very good feedback about that. Somebody was just saying to me this week, actually, that people really like to be in the sort of hall of fame of the Online Trust Alliance, and will change products that they're using in order to improve that behavior, which I think is like great news. That's that's the kind of thing that you can measure only indirectly, but the OTA's reputation is sufficiently good that effort is really worth it, that trust audit. So that makes me feel really good. We've got a bunch of milestones coming up. In particular, and a big thing here that's very important is I found out that some of that, we all found out, most of them knew it, and I just didn't know it, that some of the data collection that we were doing is actually being done manually. Given my background, this gives me hives, so I insisted that we try to figure out ways to automate that. Those efforts are underway, and so that we can expand this report, because especially since people are taking it seriously, this is the kind of thing where we should invest in this kind of thing in order to make it scale. So that's what we're trying to do. We are well under budget here. This is partly because some of the reports are late, and they're late, and the reason they're late is because we haven't focused on this maybe quite as much. The budget for this, however, and part of the reason we're under budget is because we didn't know what the automation was going to cost. So the estimates for that are quite bad. So it's entirely possible that some of this money is going to come back because we underestimated. On the other hand, the risk is also in the other direction. If we underestimated how much it's going to cost and we go way over, then we'll have a problem here, but we'll have it in the other direction. So this is the only case where I'm concerned that we're under budget now and we could easily be over budget later. That would be bad, and we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen. Next, please.
So hold on.
Oh,
so back for that one. I mean, one of the big risks with the integration of OTA was that we had a bit of a cult of personality following the leader, and he left.
He did.
And so we had to find someone to do that. Do we identify that person and someone else's sufficient cult of leadership to follow so that OTA is not going to wither and die on the vine? Or is the report the thing that people really care about? What's the...
I think this report is a thing that people really, really care about. And I think that is something, we have the staff to be doing those things, and we're getting good results out of it. I will have more to say, however, about OTA later today.
I will reserve that question until then.
So as you can see, we've got some of these are working well. We've got a number of cases where we have managed to get endorsements. We've managed to get people on board. We also got 2 new organization members or strategic partners involved here, and we were aiming for 3, and so and the year's not over yet. So we did manage to get 2. However, it's only 1 net new because somebody else left. So nevertheless, we managed to attract 2 new people. We've also had these committees. We've had some active discussion. The active discussion is happening, but it's at a level that is perhaps a little bit less than we would like. So we would like to boost that a little bit. We have had some of the members, advocating for our stuff, and that's nice to see. This was a thing we knew we wanted to have, but we didn't really have a proper target for it. So everything is up. We're not getting quite the level of media attention that we would like, but it's important to recognize that that we get a big boost around certain events. One of the things that we're doing, we've already started, because it's really actually just a special purpose use of tooling that we already have, is we do the measures of the presidential campaigns in the United States. And so that is one of the things that is happening, and I would not be surprised if we got a little bit of a media boost out of that. Next, please. Yeah, sorry. Oh, this is the next one. That's right, because this has got a lot of there's a lot of measures in this project. I always forget that. So here are examples, however, of stuff where we're getting a little bit better. So we've got a lot of success on Twitter. We were aiming for 1,500 followers, and we've got 1,700, more than 1,700 We're about halfway on our level of YouTube subscribers, and so that's an example of something where we, hoping to pull our socks up. But of course, we're well on our way. Year's only halfway over. The views are not quite as high on the new videos as we hope, so we've got to get those to be a little bit more exciting. But you can see we've already exceeded our chapter education goal. We've got webinar attendees. We're doing reasonably well. We did integrate OTA into the rest of the Internet Society finally completely, so that's all finished. Next, please. So this is, now we're moving from things which are definitely projects into sort of style of things that we're doing. So this is regional policy engagement. What's weird about this is that we're treating it like a project, but of course it's a kind of suite of ongoing activities. So sort of critical things that we see here, we've had a whole bunch of quite successful activities in the various regions. All of the regions are having some success. And some of them are successes that we didn't exactly plan for. One thing that was quite interesting is in the North America Bureau, we had this network neutrality event in the United States. That was, I mean, we're getting beat up by some of the participants, but it's also true that we've managed to get some people to talk to each other. And nobody expected that what was going to happen was all the people in the world who are suing each other are going to sit down and sing Kumbaya, but they're willing to talk at all. I think that counts as a victory. We've had quite successful work in all of the regions. I won't read all of the details to you. But I thought that the network neutrality thing was worth calling out because some of you may have heard from some of the people who are kind of ticked with us about it, but I think nevertheless it counts as a success. And I will call out actually once again, there was this successful policy workshop in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Sally was there, and so was Konstantinos, and there's this lovely picture of a bunch of men all in their local garb, and Sally instructing them all. And I think that was a wonderful picture. Yeah, it's a great picture. I should have put that in this deck, but I think it's we don't want to highlight it too much. So we've got a bunch of milestones coming up. There's a bunch of speaking engagements. There's a policy workshop coming up. Obviously, we've continued to have engagements with the ITU. You'll notice that we're under budget on these efforts, and I think that's rather good, although we've already got 12,000 that's committed but not actually expended yet. The slight underspending is risky partially because what's happening is dates are slipping. And one of the things that happens in these kinds of engagements, we find that dates slip and they slip across annual boundaries, and that's no fun. There's another thing that happens here, and I really want to draw your attention to it because this is actually the biggest risk for this kind of stuff. If a government changes, there's a lot of elections in Africa, for instance, this year. And if the government changes or some world event happens and people change their minds, then all of a sudden, somebody who was looking like a pretty good partner is suddenly under the control of their former opposition, and we're no longer friends with them because the enemy of the friend of my friend is my enemy or something. So we find that, we have to rebuild some of those things. I will note, however, that our regional bureau staff in general have such good relations in their region that very often when a government changes, it doesn't really affect our relationship with the government itself. Next, please. So as you can see, these milestones are quite a bit less numeric because it's the kind of thing where, oh, well, we're dealing with this government, we're keeping good relations with them and so on. Very hard to measure those things in a numeric fashion. So instead, we're just talking about how likely are we to strengthen these relations and so on. It's hard to know, for instance, like in the case of the partnering with one government or intergovernmental organization on a policy-related event. Well, that's an event, and you can count it. But it's also true that it's an event, and so you don't really know whether it's having the effect in the world. It's really the relations that are as important about this as anything else. Next, please. So we've got a whole bunch of work on the online presence and how we work online. And I see that Dan is here to talk about these things as well. This report is a little bit different because, as you can see from the budget, this is actually just rolled up into the operational budget for strategic communications. Nevertheless, we've had a bunch of successes. You can see that a number of these things have already launched this year. We have the Futures website. We've had the Internet Society Foundation website, and that's up and running. So we have a bunch of things that have been launched. The integration of OTA into the Internet Society more generally has been successful. We continue to have some things that we gotta finish. We haven't had the official launch of the foundation website. I don't know what official launch means in a thing that we rolled out in the sort of casual way we did. Sometimes there's a bit of a tradition, where people want to have it's official launch day, and the thing is, it's been live for like 6-9 months. It's sort of hard to understand what official launch day is, but it seems to be important to people to pick a date. I guess that's the day we pop the champagne. I wasn't aware that we had a champagne budget, but I'll go looking for it. Now that I know, thank you, Richard. It's good to have the treasurer nearby. We're also internally, of course, we've had a back channel, which is the internal staff portal, and there's not much of an analytics engine for some of those things, or for that matter, a good internal web analytics portal for our own stuff. So we're really working on that. There's also, we've heard and are sensitive to a number of issues having to do with the way the site is laid out, the speed, the usability under certain circumstances. So we're working on that. The web team, so just on the matter of risks and issues, the web team was down a little bit. We didn't replace all of the contractors who left with full-time staff, so there are some constraints on that. Some of the translation has been a real bad problem for us. So we've got, we try to keep in French and Spanish as well as English, and the translation has just not kept up to snuff. Automated translation is just worthless. It's awful. Even I can tell it's awful. The services that we've used have sometimes been extremely slow, or they've had really big problems with the jargon that we've got, because we've got a lot of jargon. And some of the jargon, like what we should do is not have that jargon in the first place, and then we wouldn't have that problem. We talked about this a little bit earlier. But some of the problem is that there's a level of jargon that is kind of inevitable because you've got an industry and you need to use those technical terms, and it's difficult to engage with somebody who isn't really familiar with it. And I know that this is incredible to believe, but translation services do not pay their people really, really great wages all the time. And so it's difficult to ensure that you've got sort of a workforce that is just consistent. One thing we could do about this, of course, is develop a bigger communication staff and hire them in all of the languages. But then the difficulty is that we would have to hire people in all of the languages of the world. And if you think there are a lot of countries in the world, then start thinking about all the languages, and you start to have problems. Now, we do have staff, of course, in both who speak both French and Spanish, and maybe some of the things we could rely on in that. We can generate some original material in languages that are not English, but we're struggling with that a little bit.
I just had a thought here that may be useful, and if it's not, we can maybe bookmark it for later. But that's one of the things that we did at the Wikimedia Foundation was because we freely licensed all the materials. We encouraged people to translate. We made to translate on their own, and there are various ways to incentivize that. Not least of which is that the people who are contributing to translation projects and open source document projects just liked having done it. So I'm wondering if there's some kinds of materials that we could actually reach out to the Wikisource projects or some of the other Wikimedia projects and get translators. This is the kind of thing that they just love doing.
So we've had actually some pretty good luck with relying on our chapters for various kinds of translation. We've had quite a lot of good luck there. The problem comes actually when you've got sort of launch dates and those kinds of things, because it's very difficult to get people to do things for you on that kind of deadline if you're not just paying And so it's particularly when we've got launches or specific things that we're trying to do. We're trying to engage with people. When we were doing community consultation earlier this year, so we were trying to do surveys of various things. You want to translate the survey into all of the languages so they can go up at the same time on the same day, so that all of the communities have the same experience of engagement. And like one of the surveys came back and it was just laughable. I mean, it was just impossible. Nobody could believe that this was really this was even the same thing. And so those are the cases that are really causing us trouble. So we are using some of the techniques that you're talking about, but I think we can continue pushing in that direction.
Peter and Olga.
Instead of giving it the whole translation to somebody, just giving a proofreader to a natural speaker helps. We had this in Germany just a few weeks ago where we got a translation, which sounded really like some priest going from the chancel and doing some strange things. Completely wrong tone for some of the things. It's easy and that's a quick thing to check, and then you can push it back to the translations.
Olga, please.
Thank you. Somehow, what Hans Peter said, we had some good experiences with chapters before you were in the organization. We did translate some text that was okay. I agree it takes time. You cannot always comply with due dates. But I would suggest when you make a big announcement, it's a short text, read it, give it to some native speaker and read it. When you were appointed, and I sent it to Gonzalo, it was really a bad text in Spanish. The same with the foundation. It's a short text that can be, you can send it to me and I can, it's 5 minutes. So if it's really an announcement, that should be double checked.
Done? No? Okay.
I would just say thank you for the feedback. We've got a number of ideas and plans. We know what we need to fix, and we've tried a couple of things. There've been some failures which we've learned from, and so now we know the kind of thing we need to do. So definitely, I'm aware of many folks here wanting that.
Okay, next slide. So there's a whole bunch of KPIs here. A couple of things I want to point out is that we've had 1.6 million page views on internetsociety.org since the beginning of the year. So by June 12th, we'd already hit that number. We've got a bunch of efforts that we're trying to complete this year. A thing that is quite important from my point of view is this chapter website template. So one of the things we've noticed is that the chapters have a difficult time keeping up with this, and a number of them have asked us for this. So we've actually put out an RFP that we're looking at the responses right now. So that's something that we can deliver, and that's a benefit that we can give to the chapters. The Global Internet Report and the Futures website is already successfully launched. So there are a number of these things that are basically done. One thing that is not the case is that the internet.nl test suite compliance is not finished yet, and we're working on that. But as you can see, we've got some sites that are already completely in conformance with that, and we're working very hard to complete the rest of it. I'm a little bit touchy about these sorts of things, because I always feel like if we're going to be advocating for open standards, we really ought to follow them. So that's one of the things that I've been grouchy about. Next slide, please. We've got some issues here. The GDPR continues to be the gift that keeps on giving. So we've got an audit that we need to do on that, and it's been moved to the last half of the year, so it's still not done. We've got some mobility issues where we've got a proposal that's been accepted, so that's these things are getting started. So these are all things that you would expect are gonna complete later this year. But some of them are running a little bit late because they've been moved across the mid-year boundary. Next, please. The next area was the sort of service bureau. The idea of the service bureau was sort of to knit together a bunch of things that we were already doing into a kind of one-stop shop. in order to make engagement with the chapters a little bit easier. So we've got a bunch of chapter workshops that have been organized. We're doing the performance evaluations themselves. This is all complete. So this is all work. You know, we did the full evaluation. We've also been talking to them in terms of the training that we've been doing, and so on. We're currently accepting applications for the chapter-thon, so that seems to be working. There's a second round of the admin funding program that is coming up, and we've got some chapters that are more engaged with others. Also, you notice that we've got this support of Beyond the Net medium and large grant selections. That, of course, is strictly speaking now moved to a foundation activity. So this is the year where we're moving the Beyond the Net thing over, and so there were pieces that were done inside the Internet Society, and now pieces that are being picked up by the foundation. This is a little bit under budget. It's always a little bit difficult to know with this budget because, again, this is a sort of a how we work rather than particular things we're doing, but it is under budget. There are a couple of things, though, that I really want to point out. We continue to have about 30% of the chapters and 100% of the special interest groups that don't have bank accounts. And in that 30% is a hard nub of ones that are never going to have a bank account or that are going to take many years to do it. And this is a real serious problem for our community, right? It's just a practical fact that as a legal matter, we really should not be transferring money to like people's individual bank accounts for organizational purposes. That's the kind of thing that raises really, really bad eyebrows at the IRS. So we can't do that. But on the other hand, our chapters are in some cases quite dependent on this, and we can't send them money right now. So this remains a very big challenge. It remains a challenge also for the foundation. We'll talk about that tomorrow because the foundation, of course, is constituted in such a way that it can only send money to nonprofits. And some of those organizations are not nonprofits. And the way we're going to handle that is perfectly fine, but it again runs into this problem that even if we manage to solve that problem, we still got 30% of them who can't accept the money because we can't send it to them. We've also got a whole bunch of new systems. So some of you will have noticed that the Member Nova rollout did not really go as we might have liked. There were a whole bunch of problems having to do with the way that project had been managed in the past. It turns out that there were a number of definitional questions that were not asked in the early days of the project. Those of you who have a software background here know that if you failed to include a critical feature in your definition when you're setting up the project, then that's never going to get any better until you turn it on. And we had a few of those missing. So we're really having to recover from that, and it is a giant time sink. Every time we have one of those problems, it's a really big problem, and it's costing a lot of time and effort on the part of the community engagement people who are working really, really hard to solve these problems, and they're taking a lot of nasty feedback as a result. Like some of the feedback that has been received is just downright rude. There are some members of our community who are not always that nice, and when they don't get the chocolate bar or whatever that they wanted, they get quite nasty about it, as though this is somehow a personal failing on the part of somebody who they're dealing with. So I appreciate the forbearance that the staff have shown in the face of those things, and I would ask, since this is an open session, that any community members who are listening, there are people on the other end of that email, and you could maybe phrase it sometimes a little bit differently. But we do appreciate that some of the work on the Member Nova rollout in particular has caused an enormous amount of frustration, and it's on us to fix it. Next slide, please. So we do have some indicators here that are pretty good. The aim was that we were going to get 60% of the chapters to attend trainings and sessions in order to help them run their chapters more effectively. And in fact, 77% of the chapters have already done this. So we're way ahead. Chapters are obviously finding that valuable, and we're really, really happy with that. We're going to continue to provide it. We see that we're trying to get partnerships going. We don't have any yet, but we've got a few things that are in the works. we've got some things that are in progress, but we haven't gotten anywhere with it. But obviously, like 40% of chapters participating in Chapterthon. Well, Chapterthon isn't closed yet, so we don't actually know yet. Next, please. We've got some chapter performance evaluation. Oops, we went a little too far. Some chapter performance evaluation criteria that we're working on. We've had a test round. The next round is planned for the end of the year, so we think this is going to go. We have had all of the regions have a chapter improvement plan to make sure that any chapters that are sort of slipping down, we make sure that we get on top of those. There is something to talk about here a little bit, and that is, as an organization, we spend an awful lot of effort on the chapters who are maybe not participating as effectively as they might. And so if you think of, I mean, you've all had presentations from various chapters that are real rock stars, and one of the structural problems with the way we've organized our work is that we spend really a lot of effort trying to make sure that the chapters that are really falling behind, that they come up so that they meet the requirements in their engagement letter. We're not then spending a lot of time and effort on the ones who are really, really succeeding. So one of the things that we want to do, over the next 12 months or so is sort of try to identify ways of engaging also with the people who are really succeeding, and kind of like hooking them up with other people who are maybe not succeeding as dramatically, but who are successful, in order to bring those people up and improve things a little bit. We don't have a real answer for that right now, but it's one of the things that we've really been paying attention to. Because this is a constant problem. This is a problem when you're teaching also, or any of those kinds of things. You spend a lot of time on the people who are lagging, then the A students don't really get the attention that they need. And what that means is you can't get them from like A to A double plus. We have some people who are really A double plus already. Maybe what we can do is inspire other parts of the organization with the people who are really doing great work. And we certainly value the chapters who are doing all that great work, the ones who are really the most successful. And maybe they don't feel that way because we're not paying that much attention to them. So I think that this is an area where we want to improve things a little bit. I think that's the last slide. Yeah. Yes. So with that, I'll conclude this part of the presentations. And if there are any further questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. A lot of material presented. Questions? Walid.
I just wanted to applaud your efforts and the staff for doing such let's say, despite the short time you've been on as the CEO, you've done a lot, and that's something to recognize, as well as the staff. And particularly the new mindset, I'd say the approach to the Middle East, as you noted, having Saudi Arabia and Kuwait is a very positive thing. And the approach, I think, is
Okay.
So the approach, I think, that works best is, as you said, seeing the value from, I think my voice is out, the value from the perspective of governments and agencies that are on the ground the actual authority, because not many undemocratic countries, you don't have the luxury of communicating with civil society. And so I'd say push on towards that, but also keep in mind that there are other regions in the Middle East that might be even more democratic and have more space and engage with civil society.
Okay. Let's do a sound test, because I think Walid broke the system. 1, 2, 3. 1. Is it okay now? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Do you want to? You're fine. Okay. So Andrew.
So thank you for that. I don't feel that I can take credit for this. So it's really the staff who've done a lot of work, and Renalia and her group. Renalia has led a lot of the efforts around measurement, and her entire department has really focused on this. And all of the staff have really dug deep to deliver on this. This has been for me a really important priority, and I know that some of the time, I think it's sort of exhausting for people because they feel like there's a million things to do, because there is a lot of work to do, and the Internet Society staff was already quite busy doing all of the things they were doing in the world. But to link back with what we were talking about before lunch, my feeling is that we need to be able to show these things so that our community really believes that that we're doing these things. So whether we're there was a good bureau already in the Middle East, just to pick on that particular example, and they were doing lots and lots of work. And what's happening here is that we're starting to see the fruits of that. But seeing the fruits of that, internally is great. But the additional thing, but having these things that we can point to the whole community to say, no, see, like this is a link that you can make now through the Internet Society. I think that this is, potentially very good for our membership. It's very good for us as an organization, and it's good for the internet because we can link all of these people up. Nothing would thrill me more than to be able to, turn things up in the Middle East, in places where people were very reluctant to engage with the internet and to discover, oh no, this is a tool that is good and positive for people in that country as well. So that really excites me.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other questions? Okay, good. Yeah, excellent. So thank you for the really good summary. So that gives us the helicopter view of what's going on. So this is going to conclude our open session for today.
There's one more little piece, right?
Oh, you have.
Is this?
There was one on board level indicators, and then there was one on the process of the 2025 strategy.
Right. Oh, so those are still part of the.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the executive starts in point 4 then.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
So we do have a bunch of indicators, and what we're trying to work on here is stuff for reporting to you over time, and these become then part of the public record, which then of course feeds back and allows us to continue to get better and better. Next, please. So as you know, we had this stuff about reporting, and I just gave you this overview about some of the baselines and what we've been doing. In Singapore, we'll show some additional things, and we'll show delivery of the action, the action plan for 2020. And then in January, we'll have the annual impact report. So one of the things that we haven't always done has been super numerical about some of the indicators that we report on annually, but we'll have a little bit more of that. So that will happen next January. Next, please. So this is just a quick overview of these indicators. We've got a bunch of these things, and I'm not going to go through every detail of this, but these are the ones that we were talking about a moment ago. The things that we've just walked through, because I'm not going to talk through all of these again because you've already just seen these. So if you keep going, Kevin, as you can see, we've got these worked out for every one of the areas that we're working on this year. Next. And one more. And so in order to make these clearer for you, we've got a prototype dashboard that has been, people have been working on internally. I want to call out in particular Tom Stark. So this is a beginning example of it. So the idea here is that we've got these categories, we've got these indicators that are, in various ways, we expect certain kinds of things, which are numeric indicators, and then you can watch them and you can see whether we are continuing to make progress. Initially, we're going to launch this in a fairly static way, so you'll get snapshots of this, and you'll see it from time to time. But the plan is over time that this becomes an active tool, and you can check on it at any time, and you can use it. So these are, this is one of the example cases. Next, please. You can see here that this is the financials view of it. Now, one of the really big challenges of our financial reporting systems right now is that, we do standard accrual accounting, but one of the things is that a lot of our activities in the field are on a cash basis, right? So they're prepays and all the rest of it. And that information is not in our financial reporting stuff. It's in a different system, and not all of this stuff is easily accessible via API right now. In fact, several of these things are not really easily accessible via API right now. So Sandy and her department are gradually rolling out the systems to support that kind of stuff, but they're doing that at the same time as we're developing this thing. So the initial deployment of this is going to be accruals only, which means, of course, that as a project management tool, this is effectively useless. You can't actually tell where somebody is on budget if you don't know how much cash they've actually already spent, despite the fact that it hasn't shown up in accruals yet. So that's actually one of the things that is a limitation of what we've got right now. Nevertheless, we're building this so that, once we've got all of the data underlying it, we can just turn it on and it's all available. In the meantime, you can play with it and see, and see what it is, as long as you understand that it's not actually telling you where the money is right now. So that's another thing. I think there's another slide. Yeah, so there's more monitoring and reporting, and you can see this one is so cool. This this map one, and you can't really see it on this sort of static view, but the map actually shows you things about how we're acting in the various regions, so you can tell something about our engagement with the chapter and so on. And it's a live one, so you can click over over various regions and see a number of different things. Next, please. Similarly, you can see, so this is an example improving the technical security. So you can see in this case, various milestones that we've got planned and how far along we are in them and so on. And again, the intention is that initially this is going to be static, but then over time this is going to be a live dashboard. So you can, if somebody comes and happens to ask you, because you're at something or whatever, and it's like, that stupid internet society, they never do anything, and then you can show people, hey, no, see, we're doing this. So that's part of the goal of this. In the long run, what we want to be able to do is to be able to use this for our membership, for our partners, and so on, so that they have a real-time access to, what is it that the Internet Society is doing. You just link to it, and it becomes very easy. I mean, do not think that that is a next year project, right? We have to develop this. This has to be really robust, because once you start turning this on in public, it's really got to run all the time. Next, please. So I think that that was all the samples that I had, but I was really excited about this tool. This is not something that we talked a lot about in our plans last year. There was a little bit about reporting and so on, but I think that this is the right way to do it, and I hope that you're as excited about it as I am, because I think the staff have done a great job on this.
Yeah, I'm seeing like the cash flow is actually more or less real time. That would be, I mean, as real time as needed. It's actually quite cool. So yeah, Sean.
So we've been asking for this stuff for years. It's finally, it's great to see it landing. The ability to look at this stuff in real time is an added bonus. I think the snapshots at the beginning are great, and I really thank you guys you and the staff for rolling the stuff out. It's really awesome.
I mean, many organizations, they don't have access to that type of data. So in terms of project management, it would be really good.
And to be perfectly honest, I mean, some of this is an internal tool, right? We have a lot of people inside who are working on the various projects, and it's difficult to coordinate across, I mean, we've got people in all over the world. It's difficult to coordinate with them. Sending an email is not really the answer for this. So this is a tool that allows this kind of collaboration, and that's really the goal, to give people the tools to do it. But I think it's a really super bonus that we would have this available sort of to everyone. But we're going to start with the board.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions? Okay, so
this is the final bit that we'll talk about in the public session. And this is having to do with our strategy, our sort of, I don't want to call it long-term strategy. I hate long-term strategy documents because they usually seem to be useless. But it's worth it to have, something like a strategic vision. What are you going to do over the next 5 years? And be able to talk about that in a sort of reasonably compact and sensible way. And the goal of this, of course, is to guide our action plan for 2020, but also to guide our action plan into the future. So one of the things that I have found a little frustrating, previously as a member of the Internet Society and now as a member of the staff, is that it's not always clear how the annual action plans link up to one another. And the goal here is in part to give that sort of narrative. So we have an obvious way of saying, this is what we're going to do in 2020, and that's going to lead obviously into things that we do in 2021 in the event that the thing that happens in 2020 is, turns out to be useful. I don't want to suggest that this is like a 5-year plan and we're going to do it like, this is some sort of Stalinist hellscape. Instead, the idea here is that this gives us a vision for where it is that we're trying to go, and it gives us a sort of, a picture of what good looks like, so that we can sort of say along the way, hey, we're moving towards that or we're not. Next, please. So we've actually had quite a lot of success here. We did a bunch of work back in the beginning of the first quarter with a sort of picture of of what our proposals were, and I reviewed this with you at our last meeting, or a previous meeting rather. We've also done a bunch of stakeholder feedback. We had a lot of different kinds of feedback. We engaged with our membership and with the chapters and so on through various surveys. We had some sessions with the inductees of the Internet Hall of Fame, so we got some very frank views there. It's really been quite good. We've done a lot of trends analysis. We're well into defining the outcomes and so on in the flagship projects, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. Obviously, then as we complete this, we complete the framework, and we end up with a plan that you will approve or disapprove. I hope not in November as part of our budgeting effort. Next, please. Similarly, we've done a bunch of work on the 2020 plan itself, so a very similar sort of thing. One of the cool things here is that the staff, and we'll talk about this again a little bit later today, the staff developed a lot of these projects. So the idea was that we opened this up internally, and we had a lot of internal inputs and so on, and then we've done some analysis of it. Next, please. So that's the state of affairs that we've got, and that gives you a picture of where we are along this line. The next things, obviously we make the detailed plan, we make an annual plan, we make the standard annual action plan that you normally approve every year, and there'll be a budget, and then we will implement it. So that's the conclusion of the public portion of this, and I think that's all the public things we had to talk about.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, good. But then we're gonna move into executive session, and then we will not open until tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yes, unless any other business was in public session.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I mean, let's do any other business now in public session so that we can close until tomorrow, basically. So anyone has any other business? Okay, good. So tomorrow we will be opening for video participants at 10 o'clock in the morning.
10:10.
10:10. We will be opening at 10:10 local time. Okay, thank you very much.